School District's Board of Education. It is 6:02 on June 3rd, 2020. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast at the direction of the board, and the recording or broadcast may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. Before we begin our regularly scheduled program, I invite you to join me in a moment of silence for George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. I'd like to say a few words, but let's have a moment of silence first, please. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. These are names that I think everyone knows very well by now. And as we grieve for their deaths and for many other Black Americans, it's a time for educators. It's a big time. For the sake of our students, we must engage in difficult conversations at this time around racism, privilege, bias, and systemic racial inequalities. We can do better and we can be better. And it's time. In unrelated news, but really for another moment of silence, our country has now seen over 109,000 deaths due to COVID-19. California has had 4,361 deaths at last count, and San Diego County has seen 255 deaths. Please join me in a moment of silence for the victims of COVID-19. Thank you again, and it's not over yet, so please stay safe. A quick thank you to our health workers on the front lines out there saving lives, and to everyone in our community following the health protocols as we begin to slowly reopen right now. Thank you all. And now I invite you to stand and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and now we get to move into our regular program for the report out of closed session. Clerk Zane.
Thank you, Madam President. The closed session began at 4:20 p.m. The Board of Education took the following action in closed session. With regard to item 2.1A, in the matter of pending existing litigation, case number ADR-050-12020, on a motion by Patel and a second by Couvret, the board voted to approve the final settlement. The vote was unanimous with ayes Patel, Couvret, O'Connor, Ratcliffe, Beatty, and Zane. Item 2.4A, nothing to report. The item was pulled. Item 2.4B, nothing to report. The item was pulled. Item 2.6A, in the matter of public employee appointment, employment, principal, elementary school. On a motion by Patel and a second by Beatty, the board voted in closed session to appoint Angelica Barragan-Sue as principal of Creekside Elementary School. The vote was unanimous with ayes Patel, Beatty, O'Connor, Ratcliffe, Zane, and Couvret. Item 2.6B, in the matter of public employee appointment, employment, principal, middle school, on a motion by Patel and a second by Zane. The board voted in closed session to appoint Christine Donnelly as principal of Mesa Verde Middle School. The vote of the board was unanimous. Ayes Patel, Zane, O'Connor, Ratcliffe, Beatty, and Couvret. Item 2.6C, nothing to report. No other reportable action was taken during closed session. Closed session adjourned at 5:01 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clerk Zane. Item 3.3, members in attendance. I see all of our board members, including our student board member, Ms. Aiken. As Dr. Phelps was just reminding her, she's only got one more after this. But for now, everyone's here, so thank you. And further welcome to the public. Ms. Aiken, take it away. Ms. Akins, are you ready for the moment of, for the welcome to the public? You got this?
Yes.
Okay.
My thing keeps popping in and out. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, get it. It's happened.
So if I break up, I apologize. So welcome to the monthly meeting of the Board of Education. Due to COVID-19 related social distancing measures, the June 3rd Board of Education meeting will be conducted entirely online via virtual video conferencing. Governor Newsom's executive order on March 12, 2020, waived the requirement for board members to physically participate in a public board meeting at the same location. The intent is not to limit public participation, but to protect public health by following the governor's stay-at-home order and San Diego County's order limiting attendance at public assemblies. Public speakers were requested to submit 3-minute comments by the public comment forum link between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. prior to the start of the 6 p.m. open session regular meeting. If indicated on the form, comments submitted via the online public comment form will be read aloud by our Chief Communications Officer, Christine Peck, during Agenda Item 4.2, Public Comments, or the corresponding agenda item. Item 4.2 is placed on our agenda to enable members of our community to bring items that are not placed anywhere else on the agenda to the board's attention. Under normal circumstances, comment time is limited to 3 minutes per public comment, with a maximum of 15 minutes per topic unless waived by the board president, and speakers may only comment on one topic under item 4.2. Today, however, public comments are submitted prior to the board meeting and we accommodate it as time permits to ensure public participation. The Brown Act does not permit board action or extended discussion of any item not on the agenda, but your concerns will be referred to staff. With that said, welcome and thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much, Ms. Akins. You didn't cut out at all. Perfect. That brings us to item 3.5, the approval of our agenda sequence. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Dr. Patel, and a second by Mr. Zane. Any discussion? There are a lot of faces on the screen again, so if you have something and I'm not seeing you, just turn on your mic and go. Not seeing any further though. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I'm seeing all 6, and I forgot, Ms. Akins, you have a preferential vote here.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, 6-0. Thanks very much. Okay, this takes us to our oral presentations. Student board representatives aren't here during COVID-19, so let's move to 4.2, which is public comments. Clerk Zane.
Thank you, Madam President. We have just a few public comments this evening. We'll begin with one to be read by Ms. Peck, and then the second one, it was done in conjunction with a couple individuals and includes a video. So we'll start with the first comment provided by Terry Norwood. Ms. Peck?
Thank you, Clerk Zane. Comments by Terry Hall from San Diego. Superintendent and board members, it is with much concern that I report once again that the information for the negotiations listed on the closed session agenda 2.4b are not provided to the public. This is in violation of the PUSD board bylaws, see page 5, BB 9321E. The lack of transparency in this school district is appalling. Are you tweaking the definition of the board to meet in closed session with its real property negotiator prior to the purchase, sale, exchange, or lease of real property by or for the district in order to grant its negotiator authority regarding the price and terms of payment for the property, Government Code 54956.8. Furthermore, you are to, quote, before holding the closed session, the board shall hold an open and public session to identify its negotiators, the property under negotiation, and the persons with whom the negotiator may negotiate. For purposes of real property transactions, negotiators may include members of the board, Government Code 54956.8. Agenda items related to real property negotiations shall specify the district negotiator attending the closed session. If circumstances necessitate the absence of a specified negotiator, an agent or designee may appear in place of the absent negotiator as long as the name of the agent or designee is announced at an open session held prior to the closed session. The agenda shall also specify the name of the negotiating parties and the street address of the real property under negotiation. If there is no street address, the agenda item shall specify the parcel number or another unique reference of the property. The agenda item shall also specify whether instruction to the negotiator will concern price, terms of payment, or both. Government Code 54954.5. Please explain your actions for the lack of transparency. That concludes Ms. Hall's comments.
I just want to correct, Ms. Peck named her as Ms. Hall. Her name is actually Terry Norwood.
Excuse me.
So I want to make sure I make that correction on the record. Mr. Zane stated her name correctly. It was a comment from Terry Norwood from San Diego.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Phelps and Ms. Peck. The next public comment, perhaps this is how the confusion began, was submitted by Nancy Bellingary Hall of San Diego, along with Joelle Cohn of Poway and Nicole Moore of San Diego.
Thank you. Nancy Bellingary Hall from San Diego. Hello, Superintendent's Cabinet and PUSD Board of Education. My name is Nancy Bellingary Hall. I am a teacher from Chaparral Elementary School and a part of PUSD's school garden team, which includes teachers, volunteers, principals, and garden coordinators. Thank you for inviting us to share about Poway Unified School District's school gardens, our outdoor classrooms. Our team is excited you want to learn more about the amazing things happening at our school gardens. Instead of speaking, we created a 9-minute video to show you. You'll see many of our 26 gardens, learn about our donations to food banks during this pandemic, hear research benefits of school gardens, and find out how other districts in the country support their gardens. We plan on sharing our organic vegetable harvest with you, but of course that will have to wait. We hope you visit our gardens to get a mental break when schools are open again. Please consider the video as my public comment as well as the public comment for Joelle Cohn and Nicole Moore.
Poway is a caring community and always stands ready to support those in need. Since schools closed on March 13th, our school gardens have donated approximately 1,150 pounds of produce to local food pantries and other organizations, and donations continue each and every week. Our school gardens have also inspired many of our PUSD families to start their own victory gardens at home. Imagine a student planting a seed and just a few days later discovering a tiny leaf pushing its way up through the soil. Tending to new seedlings teaches children patience, responsibility, resilience, and teamwork. Our students learn where food comes from by watching a seed turn into a cauliflower, and they are far more likely to try a new food they have grown themselves. Not only that, they love to taste food right in the garden. Student-led farmers markets teach students about collaboration, commerce, math, and marketing as real-life producers and consumers. Monterey Ridge and Chaparral are certified to participate in PUSD's Garden to Plate program, in which schools add harvested food to cafeteria salad bars. We have seen that students cannot wait to buy lunch on Garden to Plate days, and they fill their trays with food they helped grow. We hope to see our Garden to Plate program at more schools in the near future. Enhanced nutrition education and food awareness benefit all students, and gardens create endless opportunities to teach them about healthy eating. When we eat a rainbow or make a lettuce taco from just picked produce, students begin to understand the importance of fresh whole foods. Working outside in the fresh air increases movement, calms bodies, clears minds, and reduces anxiety and depression. Exposure to the sun increases vitamin D, which strengthens the immune system, increases eye and heart health, and reduces blood pressure. It is clear that our outdoor classrooms and gardens are needed now more than ever.
At Chaparral, I had an idea to use project-based learning. Added a school-wide engineering design thinking contest. We tested layouts, researched garden elements, and produced our enriching outdoor classroom.
Our school garden allows students to learn outside the traditional setting. They are receiving real hands-on learning. I have seen our hawks thrive in our school garden.
All 26 Poway gardens give children an opportunity to see firsthand the phenomenon in nature up close and personal. They can observe the metamorphosis of a butterfly, learn pincher bugs are harmless, and bees are important for our survival. Students can experience the life cycle of a seed, a true miracle, and understand the symbiotic relationships between the plant and its pollinator. They can learn the environmental effects of sunlight, water, air, and the nutrients in the soil. Children learn to care for all living things as they work together, which in turn teaches them to care for each other. Each of our outdoor classrooms are unique and run differently, some by amazing volunteers, or one classroom and teacher, while others a combination of both. Our gardens are a safe place to enjoy, for some before school or at recess. Some have academic centers where all students rotate through specialized stations. For example, they might learn nutrition in one station, engineering, rain gutters at another, or the chemistry of soil in the last station, or possibly a math station where they might measure plants or figure out the surface area of the soil to plant. An agricultural station might focus on composting and recycling. NGSS-based lessons can easily be taught in these outdoor classrooms. Social studies could be incorporated with the local kumai and how they use native plants, or posting signs telling which country the plants originated from. Both staff and students can meet their social-emotional needs, enjoying a nature bath surrounded by flora and fauna that they help nurture. They can see, smell, hear, taste, and touch plants and animals through the lens of a scientist, artist, mathematician, economist, writer, helper, and farmer. School gardens help focus concentration, stimulate healthy sleep cycles, and great places for brain breaks. Have you enjoyed a garden lately?
What inspired us really is that our kids are here are hands-on learners, and we wanted to get out of the classroom. We've always taught a little differently here.
When I'm having a rough day or like I'm stressed out, like my home life or just like regular life things, it helps to just like come out here and like be in nature, because like that's what I really like to do.
I always talk to them about urban farming, how the cost of our food is really represents what it costs to transfer it from either Central California or Northern California or Mexico or whatever. And there's money to be made. I mean, there really is. And plus it's healthy, organic, and teach them what organic means. And yeah, I have several students that have gone through this that are practicing at home and actually, working in some of the bigger, like I have 2 guys that are working in farms in Encinitas. And we're always bouncing text off each other, and they want to learn how to do aquaponics. We built an in-ground pond, 8,000 gallons. We built another lettuce beds. We taught them how to pour concrete and form up layers and plumb pipes. We've taken the kids along the whole line where we come and harvest these plants, bring them down to a church and clean them, and actually bag them and bring them to families in need. So they see the circle of what it takes to go from a seed into the ground, grow over time, and then harvest it and then deliver it to the tables of people that need it the most. The beauty of it is that they see this progress and they see that they can contribute to something, and it builds confidence and it builds self-worth.
What the garden means to me gives me a peace of mind. It shows me how to be patient. It teaches you how to bring life, how to manage it, take care of it, make this a better place, more healthier for you, for everybody else. And it just brings the community together.
I have some of the most successful graduates that come through this program that have a good head on their shoulders. They know that hard work pays off. And that's what draws me to this program. It's the kids, and it's the learning, and it's the give back, and it's just the love that works through this program that makes it such a special place.
I am Heather from the San Diego Master Gardeners. 70 local UC-trained Master Gardeners have consulted in 800 county schools over the last 2 decades. We share gardening best practices, pest advice, funding assistance, and encourage networking and growth of our local gardens. As volunteers, we protect the valuable agriculture industry by encouraging gardens that use our resources efficiently. School gardens are bright green spaces on campus that encourage deeper learning with hands-on activities. Higher test scores, particularly in science, have been shown when lessons are given in the garden. Gardens improve communication, allowing students to better convey emotion and aid teamwork. They improve social skills and behavior. Time spent outside in nature reduces ADHD symptoms and increases students' focus. Gardens increase creativity, critical thinking, and problem solving. Gardens lead to higher consumption of fruits and vegetables, particularly when students and parents plant, grow, and harvest produce together. The benefit of a school garden extends to teachers. Schools with gardens report high teacher and staff job satisfaction. It's a great place to enjoy a break and a meal. Studies are available to back up all these points. School gardens are in demand in San Diego. School garden requests to the Master Gardeners have steadily increased over the years. Annual requests were 40 gardens per year a decade ago, but now 60 gardens annually is common, a 50% increase. San Diego County School Districts support school gardens in varied ways. Encinitas has a farm lab visited by each student and grows its own organic produce. San Diego Unified provides a staffer to manage school garden-grown produce on the salad bar. Chula Vista saw a decline of 17% in obesity rates and attribute part of that decline to school gardens. Vista Unified supports school gardens by paying gardens for the produce they grow and provide garden support and guidance and won USDA awards. Escondido USD provides an aquaponics growing setup to each middle school. School gardens grow with district support. Irrigation and staff are the two most demanded features of a school garden. Poway, with agrarian roots, should be assisting Poway school gardens similarly to other school districts in the county.
Parents now more than ever appreciate gardens as outdoor classrooms. When they ask their kids, "How was school today?" they normally hear, "Fine." But on a garden day, they hear an exciting story about what they saw or touched or planted. Parents hear how their introverted daughter spent a recess helping in the garden, or how their normally disorganized son was a wonderfully focused garden worker. Parents marvel when their kids come home asking to try new foods. New families, especially those with anxious or special needs children, tour campuses and often choose those with gardens over those without. Gardens need constant nurturing. They need an organized plan and coordination. The majority of garden outdoor classrooms rely heavily, sometimes entirely, on volunteers. Parents and volunteers are asked to seek grants, fundraise, and donate time teaching and maintaining the garden. Volunteer parents are hard to hold on to long-term, increasingly going back to work or graduating with their child and moving on. The dedicated time volunteers and teachers give up to run an educational garden program often burns them out. The benefits of school gardens are clear. One of the Poway Board's goals is to create student-centered learning environments. School gardens are true outdoor classrooms where all education can take place, creating academically and emotionally successful student citizens ready for the next phase of life. Our dream is to have Poway Unified be a supportive district in this endeavor.
Poway is a caring community and always stands ready to support those in need. Since schools closed on March 13th, our school gardens have donated approximately 1,150 pounds of produce to local food pantries and other organizations.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ms. Bell.
All right, that takes us then to item 4.3, promotion and graduation committees. Ms. Osborne, take it away.
We should have a couple of guests being brought into the room right now. Thank you, Madam President. During this time of school closures, we have been tasked with rethinking many of our school processes and important events. While many events were canceled, we felt promotion and graduation ceremonies were milestones in a child's educational career that needed to be recognized. I would like to thank all of our participants that supported these collaborative committees that worked on plans for 5th and 8th grade promotion and our graduation. And you'll hear about those participants in just a moment. A big thank you to Christine Peck for her leadership with this effort and to our LSS executive directors, Kimberly Renz, Kimmy Lochtefeld, and Todd Casson. They will now present background on the committees, the process for decisions, and the outcomes of this collaboration. Turn it over to the team. Yeah, PowerPoint should be brought up.
Thank you, Ms. Osborne. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Phelps, members of cabinet, Poway Unified staff, and members of the public. Thank you for this opportunity to share the process our teams went through that led to the celebratory events that we have held or will be holding on our elementary, middle, and high schools over the next 2 weeks. Next. From the time we closed our schools on the afternoon of March 13th to the days a few weeks later when the realization hit that we would not be returning to school, leaders across our district, county, and state began to brainstorm ideas on what we could do to celebrate our promoting 5th and 8th grade students while also honoring our graduating class of 2020 in a meaningful, safe, and feasible manner that aligns with the guidelines provided by the state of California and the San Diego County Public Health Order. Next.
In addition to aligning our process to the state and county health guidelines, more importantly, our process aligned to the feedback from our key stakeholders. It was clear from Thought Exchange that our students wanted a meaningful celebration as well as our families and staff. We pulled together a group of stakeholders consisting of students, staff, board members, administrators, and district staff to form 2 planning committees, one for the 5th and 8th grade promotion and one for graduation. It was important for us to listen closely to our students' ideas, as well as monitor and follow the county health guidelines. After exploring different formats, we ultimately planned celebratory parades, virtual promotions, and high school graduations. We also developed contingency plans in case health restrictions were to open up. Next slide. Here's an at-a-glance timeline beginning in April where we gathered feedback from our students and community. We held several meetings in May to design and finalize our parade and videos. As you can see, this week is go time and kicks off our celebratory parade starting with elementary and middle schools, and then next week we will be honoring our graduating seniors. Next slide. A key aspect to our planning was being ready to pivot no matter the circumstance. As conditions were rapidly changing, we needed to be ready. We developed contingency plans in case restrictions loosened up, and we are very proud of our students who drove the vision and the design of the parade experiences to be special and meaningful for their classmates. 2 students who serve on the Superintendent Student Advisory Council, Brooke Gorman and Cody Mongold, were instrumental in designing the promotion parade's logistical plans to assist our schools with implementing their parades. We appreciate our students, staff, and parents for helping us all pivot together to really do something amazing for our students. Next, I will turn it over to my colleague, Executive Director Kimberly Renz, who will provide more details on the elementary and middle school parades. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Kimmy. It was absolutely a fantastic day. We started with our elementary, and the committee designed a very, very student-centered promotion. That was at the core of every single decision that we made. And the celebration included a drive-through parade and a virtual promotion, including special messages from Dr. Phelps, Ms. O'Connor-Radcliffe, the site principal, and other celebrities such as the teaching staff. The parades have included decorated cars, staff clapping, cheerleaders, some tears too. I'll have to say some parents are out there a little weepy, as well as teachers of shedding tears of joy, and also lots of promotion certificates. Next slide, please. These photos really captured the celebration. And as you can see, there were smiles everywhere and prideful moments to be had by all families, students, and staff. Next, Todd Casson is going to share about our high school graduations that are coming up next week.
Thank you, Kimberly. In reviewing the data collected from our initial Thought Exchange survey, it was clear that our students from the class of 2020 were asking that we exhaust all possibilities in the hopes of holding a traditional commencement ceremony to celebrate our graduates. Next slide, please. To make that possible, the high school committee made the decision to postpone our commencement ceremonies until late July, with the hope that we will be able to gather our graduates together one last time to celebrate the class of 2020. As a placeholder, our high schools will hold a drive-through graduation parade that will take place over 3 days at each of our sites next week. Our graduates will have the opportunity to put on their caps and gowns that embody the pride we find throughout our schools in Poway Unified. exit their vehicle, walk across the stage, and pick up a diploma, just as they would at a traditional commencement ceremony. Our site teams have worked extremely hard to make this an experience our graduates will remember for years to come. And I'm excited to see the celebration come to fruition for the class of 2020. Next slide. We'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
I just want to
oops, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to state that I want to thank our LSS team and all of our executive directors for your leadership. You guys have done a phenomenal job in leading our principals and creating these special experiences for our kids and making the best of the situation. So I just want to thank you all for your leadership. And it's been amazing looking at all the pictures and everything. And I think our principals and all of you guys did an amazing job. And so I've received nothing but really positive feedback from our families and very appreciative. And I think it far exceeded their expectations. So good job. And thank you so much for your leadership and for sharing all of this. We look forward to seeing the high schools and stuff. But I believe that, Christine, that we're going to post all of these pictures and stuff online, right?
We have been, yes. It's been fun.
Can I just add, I also wanted to make sure I included that the special celebrities in all the videos were all the board members. So I thank you so much to every board member who took the time to videotape a special message for all the promotions and graduations. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Kimberly, did you keep my PowerPoint presentation as part of my remarks?
Of course, it's there.
Thank you, team.
Well, thank you all for giving everyone a rundown of that. Having participated in one myself from the comfort of the car, watching my little one hop out and get his certificate and taking 10,000 photos from the passenger seat of my car. It was really fun while holding the bubble making machine. It was a lot of fun. The community was great too. They really did come out for those fifth graders. They lined the street leading up to the school. It was really remarkable. But I think most of the schools had something special like that. The community just got behind it. It was wonderful. Great for my little guy. So thank you. Yeah, go TJ.
And I just want to give one last quick shout out. I did this at the last meeting, but the student involvement in these plans, just fantastic. I mean, we can honestly say, you know, sometimes when you're involved with some students and you're doing projects, say at the elementary school level, you say the students did it, but we know the parents really did most of the work. But having been part of these committee deliberations, I can honestly say how much of this work was done by the students, and it's quite remarkable. So congratulations to everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Okay, we're moving. 5.1 is approval of the consent calendar. Anyone have anything they'd like to pull? I guess I'll go down the line like I normally would. Ms. Akins, anything you'd like to pull?
No.
No? Who's next? Dr. Patel?
Nothing to pull.
Ms. Beatty?
5.3A.
Okay.
That's it.
Mr. Zane?
Nothing to pull.
And Ms. Couvret?
Nothing to pull.
Okay, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Absent the one?
Absent 5.3A, yes.
I'll second.
All right, that's a motion by Ms. Couvret, second by Dr. Patel. Any discussion before we vote? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5 of us. Okay, 5-0. Let's go to 5.3. 5.3A, correct? Ms. Beatty? It was 5.3A?
Yes.
Okay.
Forgot those go first.
Oh.
So I just, shall I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I just had 2 questions. One is I just saw an email that was sent out yesterday afternoon that this agenda item was revised. I couldn't figure out where the revision was in my quick glance at the new contractual services report that was provided. So my first question is, what was the revision? And the second question is, did it comply with our Brown Act notice requirement to the public?
Thank you, Trustee Beatty. The first question with respect to the revision, I'm looking at my notes here. We pulled off, I believe, 6 attorney firms that we use under Southern California Relief, JPA. And so the contract that, and I think I explained this last year at this time, the contract that we have is with our JPA, Southern California Relief. And so we added in what now is line item 74. Southern California Relief approved attorney services for legal counsel. So all 6 of those firms that were listed in the original version will come back next month as individual purchase orders under this contract.
Okay, so I'm looking at the agenda that was posted to the public, and it doesn't reflect those changes. So that would be my first comment. And then the second one is, it was my understanding that we needed to have our own contract with those firms so that if there were any legal liability issues, we would have their errors and omissions insurance on file, showing that they had their proper insurance in place.
So with respect to your first question, I forwarded the revised CSR, I believe, to the board office. I'm not sure if it was yesterday or the day before, and my understanding was that was to be posted on the website. I don't know, I didn't check to see if it was posted as a revised document. Secondly, our JPA is charged with making sure that all of the attorneys that we use, and there's a list of them, have all of the insurance requirements and all other certifications and licenses they need to practice. So that's part of the benefit of being in a JPA, is they take care of that work for us. They vet the attorneys that we use. And for the most part, we've been pleased with them over the years.
Ms. Beatty is correct, though. If that change was made only 24 hours ago, then that change can't be made. So it has to be a minimum of 72 hours. So.
Well, it's also, excuse me for interrupting, but it's also not posted. It hasn't been disclosed to the public either.
Agree. So what we need to do then is pull all of those items, Ron, or we need to just go ahead and approve as is, as posted.
We don't want to approve as posted. So
okay,
we want to
can you say
can we approve it without specific line items?
Yes. So we can approve that one minus a particular line item. So Ron, can you make that recommendation of what you're asking for to approve?
Yes, let me go through the list here of the ones that we're going to have to pull. So looking at the old list, we're going to pull number 40, Devaney, Pate, and Morris. We're going to pull number 64, McCune and Haber. Bear with me here, I'm going down the list. That one's fine. We're going to pull number 84, Tenser Sherman, LLP. We're going to pull number 92, Walsh and Associates. I want to make sure I didn't miss one here. Number 13, Artiana Shinoff, we will pull from that list. Was someone keeping track? Was that 5 or 6? And I think I said 92 was Walsh and Associates.
98.
And 98, thank you. That's the one I'm missing. 98, Winnett, Patrick, and Weaver. So there should be a total of 6. So those will be purchase orders So next month, since we're pulling this, at the next meeting, we'll bring back, and then I think we need to pull, obviously. Oh, no, we don't, because it wasn't on there. 74, we'll bring the SCR in the amount of the current 74 in the amount of 237,000 on the CSR, and then those 6 will be purchase orders at the June 25th meeting.
So I guess then that goes back to the question. I mean, so it's a change from the way that we originally did things, which was have these contracts in place. First $50,000 we pay directly. It's our contractual arrangement or our payment directly to that law firm. And so I assume we're still paying these law firms with these purchase orders. And normally, business-wise, we can't issue a purchase order to an entity unless we have a contract with them, but we're not entering into a contract with them. That's kind of the financial side. And then the legal side is the first 50,000 is us directly paying them. So if there's an issue that we have with them, say down the line, we don't have any kind of contract. It's a third party that has the contract. So what are our rights with regard to that law firm?
I'd be happy to share with you the contract, and I can provide that to you and the other board members. We've been working under this arrangement since I've been here for a few years. Last year, we changed the way that we did this to make it more streamlined, and in recognition that we employ these law firms through the JPA. And our agreement with the law firms, even though we pay them the first $50,000 directly, the agreement is with the JPA. So again, I'd be happy, if you'd like to take a look at the agreement, I'd be happy to share it with you and the board.
I guess what I'm just looking at it from a business structure, it's almost like these are subcontractors or sub-vendors. And you have a vendor that you enter, say a general contractor, and you enter into a contract with. And then if they sub out the work to subcontractors, we don't pay those subcontractors directly. So if we're doing it this way, where the SoCal Relief is then contracting out to the law firms, shouldn't the payments then just go to SoCal Relief and then they disperse them to their subcontractors, so to speak?
I think that's a good question. And I remember having this conversation with Associate Superintendent Jimenez and Mr. Wilson, our risk manager. I think that and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Jimenez, I think we're given the choice of either paying the attorneys directly or paying the JPA for the services rendered. The decision was made prior to us beginning that I think that we felt that we had more control with respect to reviewing the invoices and making sure that we were billed correctly by paying the first $50,000 directly to the attorneys. Does that sound right, Associate Superintendent Jimenez?
Yes, the contract is with Southern California Relief. They approve the firms. We also have input. It's a $50,000 deductible per case, but we do pay the invoices directly to the particular firms. But the contract overall is with Southern California Relief. That allows for better billing review and cost control on our part, since we're reviewing each one of those invoices that come to the district directly, but they are contracted under the SCR umbrella.
That was my recollection, that it was really an internal controls decision.
How does that improve the review?
We get the statements directly. We can review them line item by line item. They're not going through a third party. They're on the attorney's invoices. They're specified, they're detailed. I haven't seen what the JPA sends in terms of invoices or bills, so I can't speak to, what their version looks like.
But what you're describing,
I'm providing the rationale that was, sort of argued before we got here.
what you're describing isn't a change, though. The attorneys, the law firms directly submitted their invoices to the school district. So I'm trying to ascertain how that's changed now by not having a contract with the law firm.
We have, since I've been here, we have not contracted directly with these legal firms. It's been through the JPA, at least for the last 3 years.
Can I suggest that because we have pulled all 6 of these, that we have this discussion offline to learn the background, and we can bring it up again at our next meeting, the 2nd June meeting, if you still have questions at that time?
Are you saying just a private discussion? Because obviously offline as a board wouldn't.
Mr. Little, no,
muster.
for you. Mr. Little has explained this before. So you're the one who still has questions. He could explain it directly to you again so that we don't waste any more time. Is that okay? Because it is going to come up again next month. So if you still have questions or comments that you think the public needs to be part of, we can talk about it again then.
Well, I think this is important for the public. This is taxpayer money that's going to pay legal fees. So
and it's coming up again next month when we will actually vote on it.
The bottom line,
Correct.
Trustee Beatty, is the fact that we have a JPA that pays for our lawsuits. These firms cover the lawsuits and they cover the first $50,000. The payment goes to the JPA or it goes directly to the law firms. Either way, we screwed up and inadvertently listed all the law firms when we should have listed the JPA. So we tried to revise it from what I understand, but we did it not within the time frame of posting it correctly. So that's why we're asking to just revise it by deleting it off of the specific contract. And so staff screwed up and should have not have done that within 24 hours. Staff should have caught that and done it within the 72 hours. Staff will not do that again. Moving forward, we will delete this. If you have any further questions, there's really nothing else to state on this item other than the fact that this is so that we can pay for those lawsuits when people file all those lawsuits against the district. These are the firms that represent us in those lawsuits.
Right. I'm trying to ascertain clarity to the question that I posed. One comment is, it's my recollection, I've been here 8 years, and last year was the first time we made this change. We've always, since I've been here, listed the individual law firms that were a part of the JPA. And I was advised by one of the attorneys that worked for the school district that any payment we make to a law firm, we need to have our own contract with them. And we pay them directly $50,000. What I'm confused about is Mr. Jimenez said that this provides greater transparency because we get to see the law firm's invoices. That's not a change from how things have always been done prior to now, under this new structure where we don't have a direct contract. There's no change there. So I think it's a legitimate question, that a pretty straightforward question. I don't understand how we're able to have greater oversight over the invoices, because they always previously, Artiano Shinoff, who was the main recipient of our district's legal work through the JPA, always sent their own invoices directly to the school district. And all the board members know that because they were the subject of numerous Public Records Act requests where we saw those invoices and we saw them itemized and we saw how much each partner or associate or clerk made, and we saw what their billing charges were for travel and for other legal work like writing memos. So I just want a straight, honest answer.
We are being honest. So, Mr. Jimenez, do you want to respond to her question?
Maybe repeat the question too, because I got lost in all of that.
Mr. Jimenez, when I asked why we were doing it this way, he said it provided greater ability to have oversight. And I asked how that manifested itself. And his response was, we actually get to see the law firm's bills. That's not a change. All of us board members know that's not a change because we've always seen the law firm's bills. And I cited Artiano Shinoffen as an example.
We heard you say that part. I just wanted you to simplify your question so Mr. Jimenez and all of us know what you're asking him to answer.
Okay, have I simplified it enough?
I understand what your question is now. Thank you.
So yes, that is correct, that in the past we received billings directly. The change is how we have grouped those firms under one contract because they are directly contracted with Southern California Relief. They contract directly with those firms that are available for counsel. We receive those voices as we have in the past. But what I was referencing is by receiving those invoices directly, it gives us the ability to review that the services for which we were billed were accurate, since we are the ones working directly with these firms. If I'm understanding the question correctly.
Yes, thank you. I don't see that that's a change.
So for clarification, and I'm slightly confused in all of this now too, what is being sought other than the fact that we need to pull from my notes here, items 13, 40, 64, 84, 92, and 98 because of noticing requirements? Would it be acceptable? I know, Ms. Beatty, you pulled the item. For me to make a motion to approve absent or with the exception of line items 13, 40, 64, 84, 92, and 98, because I presume that those expenditures would come back at a future board meeting with adequate notice.
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay, so that was a motion, Mr. Zane? Or was that a question?
That's a motion, and I think Ms. Beatty's comment may be taken as a second.
Yes, I will second.
Okay, I heard a motion by Mr. Zane and a second by Ms. Beatty, to approve absent those 6 items that will be pulled and considered at a later meeting. Is there any discussion of any other items, any questions on any other item? Because I wasn't going to pull this, but I did think now that we've got it out here, there are 3 items on here that I think the public should be aware of that we are going to be paying out of our general fund, despite the fact that Prop P did not pass. We're going to be paying for asbestos abatement in a fairly significant amount. I remember this being an issue with many members of the public who doubted that we still had asbestos dangers in our schools. Clearly we do, and we're finding the money to take care of that safety issue, even without Prop P passing. So I think it's important to point that out. The other thing that is in here that was part of our safety plan and we hoped to pay for with Prop P money is the 25 elementary school site security camera systems. That's in here too. That's very expensive. We're finding it anyway because it's important. Does that mean that we don't get to spend that money on other very important things? Absolutely. So as the public listening, please know that we're taking care of these safety issues for our schools at the expense of other things. So please don't doubt us next time we tell you we have safety issues that we need your help with. That's all for me. I'm ready to vote if everyone else is. All right? Okay, all in favor? Do I see 5? Okay, there's Ginger. Thank you, Ms. Couvret. Sorry, you're in the corner. That's 5-0. Thanks very much. All right, so we're on to 6.0. 6.1 is approval of California School Board Association Board Policies 4000 series, and this is our second reading, so it is an action item tonight. Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, this is the second reading on the May 14th agenda. The board received these policies aligned with the CSBA board policies, state of California. These are 3 board policies in the 4000 series, the concepts and roles of the Board of Trustees, Policy 4030 regarding non-discrimination in employment, and Policy 4033 lactation accommodation, which are aligned with requirements under the law. They have been reviewed by staff. The action before the board this evening is to accept approval of these policies.
Thank you, Mr. Jimenez. Are there any questions from the board on this item?
Motion for approval.
Motion by Mr. Zane. Is there a second? Second by Dr. Patel. Any further discussion? Our student board member does have a preferential vote. Ms. Akins.
Aye.
Thank you. And for everyone else, all in favor? I'm seeing 5. That's 6-0. That passes. Thanks very much, everyone. Item 7.1 is a public hearing of our 2020-2021 proposed budget, a first reading. How would you like me to do this? Would you like me to open the public hearing first, or would you like to introduce this, Mr. Little?
If you want to open the public hearing, that would be great, I think.
Sure. Okay, then I will open the public hearing now at 6:59. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, Clerk Zane?
There are none.
All right, then at this time, I will close the public hearing at 6:59 and turn it over to Mr. Little. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I believe Director Ramiro is going to join us. We'll give her a little time to get in here as I do the introduction. This evening, we're going to present to the board and the public a first reading of our district's 2020-21 general fund budget. Obviously, we present this preliminary budget in full recognition of the unprecedented level of uncertainty before us, economic uncertainty, social uncertainty, uncertainty about how we're going to best reopen our schools and our programs. That said, we do expect to get some more clarity over the next few weeks in most of these areas, and we will continue to update the board and public as things change. Next slide, please. So this will be the agenda for this evening's presentation. I'm going to try to move fairly quickly because things are going to change very soon over the next few weeks with respect to what comes out of Sacramento, as we'll discuss a little later. Next slide, please. So before we look ahead to next year's budget, we're just going to review quickly where we anticipate finishing the current fiscal year 2019-2020. Next slide, please. So what you're looking at here are what we presented at second interim, which we shared with the board in March. That was based on our unaudited, our actuals through January 31st. And we have updated those based on where we were at the end of April, but again, projecting where we'll end the fiscal year. And you can see, even though a lot has changed, right, since March 13th, where we anticipate finishing the fiscal year is pretty close to where we thought we would be, but for different reasons. So bottom line is, over the general fund combined, unrestricted and restricted, we're looking now at the third interim budget of finishing the year with a $16.6 million deficit. That includes about $10 million of carryover that we expended. So we would expect to see a large deficit because we carried over some revenues from last year. And you can see that we're finishing the year with some robust reserves, I would say, some solid reserves of a little over $43 million or 9.2%. And these will serve us well, obviously, for what's coming over the next year or so. Next slide, please. This is some level of detail I won't go into a lot of explanation about. This just shows the difference between where we thought we were going to be at second interim finishing the year and where we now project finishing the year at third interim. So we received about $600,000 more in revenues. And we're going to break this down a little further on the next slide. A little less in expenditures for a net activity of about $631,000 to the good. On the restricted side, it's a little curious. These are big numbers in terms of the differences, but they're easily explained. You may recall that each year for the past 3 or 4 years, I think it's 3 years now, the state is requiring all school districts to book the district's pro rata share of the state's STRS liability. So the district doesn't want to book its own STRS liability for sundry reasons. So it divides that liability up to the districts. And it basically asks us to book both the expenditures of $6.8 million, but it gives us the offsetting revenues so that it's a net zero implication on our books. So that's why we see a large difference in what we budgeted at the beginning of the year for revenues and what we budgeted at the beginning of the year for expenditures on the restricted side. It's hard to estimate that at the beginning of the year, so we don't. And we know, again, it's going to be net zero. So we just, it's part of our year-end close. So that's that explanation. Next slide, please. Here's a breakdown just showing the changes between second and third interim in a little different manner. So the first group of line items are revisions. So I'm not going to go through them all, but these are budget revisions we made to the current year budget. You can see some of those are COVID-19 related. So COVID supplies of $242,000, reduced bus pass fee revenues because we're transporting fewer kids and have stopped, obviously. Less facilities rentals, $400,000, et cetera, et cetera. That $2 million for distance learning devices is $2 million of restricted lottery money that you see towards the bottom of the screen that we've repurposed or that we're recommending repurposing for the purchase of one-to-one technology devices for our students. Then the middle section are projected savings, primarily based on the fact that we shut our doors as of March 16th. And so we wouldn't expect, obviously, to realize these again, hopefully. So I won't go through these again, but you can see by shutting our doors, utility savings of $750,000, some special ed savings of $600,000, some vacancy savings of positions that went unfilled for the rest of the year of about $300,000, et cetera, et cetera. So again, overall, if you were to scroll down a little bit, you'd see that we finished at $631,000 better on the unrestricted side than we thought. And on the restricted side, we had budgeted $225,000 of the PSCA professional, I'm sorry, that's not PSCA money, the district's classified school employee professional development block grant money, and we haven't expended that. So that's just going to be a carryover into next year. So that's plugged back into the budget. Next, please. Just a little different view of where we anticipate finishing the year. So based on our estimated actuals, this is how our expenditures break out on a percentage basis. So just obviously the highlights are the salary and benefits. You can see 84% of our expenditures are related to salary and benefits. That's a good number. You know, anything around 85% or less is really ideal in the current climate. You can see that we've broken that out by certificated classified. You can see our health and welfare costs are about 9.3%, and STRS and PERS are about 9.5%. And we'll include these, we've included them here so that we can take a look at how they compare to our budget that we're bringing forward for next year, 2021. Next slide, please. This slide is just meant to show the relationship between general ed enrollment and special ed enrollment and general ed expenditures versus what we expend on special ed. So currently, our enrollment is 8713 general ed special ed, and our budget is about 80% special ed. 80% general ed and 20% special ed. And that's been pretty consistent on the expenditure side over the past few years. And we'll look at how that compares to next year as well. Next. All right, so now we're going to turn our attention to the district's preliminary budget, general fund budget for 2020-21. Next, please. As you'll recall, Governor Newsom released his May revised budget proposal for 2020-21 on May 14th, nearly 2 months after the full impact of the COVID-19 pandemic was beginning to be felt. These are the highlights. As you know, he projected in his budget a $54 billion deficit over 2 years' time. Most of that was lost revenue, a little bit of increased expenditures around health and human services, as we would expect during a pandemic, and $6 billion of other COVID-19 related spending. The revenue side is a 22% decline in year-over-year revenues projected for next year. And overall, his budget for next year reflects about a 9.4% decrease compared to the current year's budget. And as we all know, those numbers result in a $19 billion hit reduction to Prop 98 funding, or nearly 23% of our funding base. Next, please. That, of course, is not doable. Not sustainable, not viable. The governor, I guess to his credit, proposed a multi-year and multi-pronged approach to resolving the deficit. I'm not going to go through the list here, but he's drawing from a sundry resources to help close the gap. A lot of one-time solutions. He recommended some supplemental payments to shore up Prop 98 annually. Next, please. But even having done all that, obviously the impacts to K-12 are significant and severe. They will impact all districts throughout the state significantly, although slightly differently depending, on your particular economics. We're looking at, and again, these are predicated on no additional relief from the federal government. Right, so many of these could be taken off the table based on his trigger language, which we note at the bottom there, that if the feds came to the table and were willing to help the state and help education to the extent that they do, then these reductions would be mitigated completely or in part. 10% reduction to our base. $353 million reduction to certain categorical programs. That could be as much as a 50% hit to any one of those categoricals. Although he's maintaining the slight special ed funding increase compared to last year, it's a decrease with respect to what we were anticipating in the January proposal. So we had already built next year's budget on what he was proposing in January. He reduced that by somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 per ADA. So that's a slight little hit to us, which we'll look at next. His proposal was no reduction to supplemental funding. There's some questions around that. A little good news, I guess, is he's redirecting about $2.3 billion that was set aside to service the state's share of PERS and STRS liability to districts to utilize for their own. That'll save us some money, as we'll see. And then there's a big pot of money earmarked for districts to address learning loss and distance learning and summer school, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, the devil's in the details. Those details are not worked out. We've heard, and he's said that those were really targeted for the districts that were most impacted. And we believe that means those with high UPP numbers. And of course, we don't fall into that group. Next slide, please. So in response, a little hope, to be honest. We know that the state Senate released their own version of the budget 2 weeks later, then the governor's proposal on May 28th. The state Senate's budget really supports K-12 funding. They're looking to keep K-12 and community colleges whole. Of course, to do that, their budget's predicated on receiving $14 billion of additional federal funding. So unlike the governor's budget, which says we're doing all these cuts unless we get federal assistance, the Senate's taking the opposite approach, saying we're not going to do any reductions unless we don't get federal assistance, right? So that's their approach. The remaining gap would be filled and covered through typical mechanisms that they use, right? Deferrals, borrowing, and increased taxes. We just heard that the Assembly is sort of in lockstep with the Senate, and that they're very aligned with the Senate's budget proposal. We anticipate they'll start negotiating with the governor tomorrow, and hopefully have these versions reconciled, somewhere in the middle, I imagine, by June 15th. Next slide, please. In the meantime, just some comments from our seat here in the CFO office. You going into this and prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we were anticipating a structural deficit that won't be mitigated even in the best case scenario. We're hopeful and we're anticipating better news from California legislature. But our direction from the County Office of Ed at this point is to build the budget based on the governor's May proposal. So you can imagine what the numbers are going to look like before I even share them with you, just based on what we just reviewed. So we really would like to suggest that we focus on shoring up our fund balance for the short term in every way possible, but recognizing that the larger solutions and reductions may have to be saved for 21-22. Next slide, please. So that said, I'm going to try to move a little quicker. Here are the assumptions for the preliminary budget. You've seen these all before, except for, of course, the LFF reductions and the PERS and STIRS rates being reduced, which, of course, save us money. You also note that we've built in almost $8 million of proposed budget solutions, which we'll review into the budget that we're bringing forward tonight. Next. So this is just to sort of share what I would say is the pre-COVID-19 budget in January versus the post-COVID budget in May. So you can see in January, and we shared this with you in March, we were anticipating about a $15 million deficit, worst case. And now, based on all those numbers we just reviewed, we're looking at a $40 million operating deficit just next year in our general fund. Beginning the year with those solid reserves we noted of $43.4 million, and spending most of those by year end, and ending the year at $3.3 million. Next. And I might just say, obviously, go back, if you don't mind, go back a slide. I think that over this week and next, all school districts in the county will be sharing similar slides with their boards. And my guess is that their net activity will be probably even larger, and many of their ending balances will be negative. Next. Here are the actual impacts of the governor's May budget on our line items. So you can see just the 10% cut to the LCFF funding is a hit of $33.2 million to our budget. That little slice of special ed funding that was taken away is worth about $500,000. The special ed early interventions preschool grant was cut in half. We'll see that a little bit later. The positive $1 million is just staff's recommendation not to contribute the $1 million to deferred maintenance that we do every year from the general fund to help shore up the reserves. On the expenditure side, you can see that the STIRS reduction will save us about $3.8 million. This PERS reduction will save us about $1.2 million. That's about $5 million to the good based on that. and then another series of staff recommendations that we'll review on a subsequent slide. Next, please. So here's what we've included in the budget with respect to budget solutions at this point. We have some one-time savings built in. I won't read them all. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer. And then we have some recommended ongoing reductions, eliminating our PSAT testing program, not filling a vacant student support specialist position, eliminating our GATE program, adjusting our supplemental budget slightly so that more funds stay at the district office, reducing funding for high school athletics slightly, et cetera, et cetera. There's 2 vacant exploration teacher positions that we would not refill. CTE has come to the table with about $373,000 of reductions for next year. And some of these others I think we've discussed prior. So in total, between the one-time and the ongoing reductions, we're looking at $7.85 million already built into those numbers of the deficit. Next. So I mentioned we started with 43.4 million of beginning balance based on this model, which we know is not going to be the final model that we have to live with. But based on this model, we end the year with $3.3 million of fund balance. And I've just listed all of those things that we can't cover by that $3.3 million. So we don't meet the 2% required reserve. We don't even account for all of our unrestricted carryover. We don't have any set-asides for COVID-19 expenditures. We don't have any reserves set aside for more distance learning implementation. And I guess for what it's worth, we haven't included any expectation of a FEMA reimbursement either. So to the extent that we received one, that would help us with the items above there. We would need, if we were going to expect to meet our 2% reserve requirement, we would need approximately $8.5 million of more reductions to make that 2%. Just some news to report from the county office, based on the unprecedented levels of economic uncertainty and the fact that all school districts, not only in the county but in the state, are going to be impacted, the San Diego County Office of Ed has waived the reserve requirements from all districts, large and small, for this particular budget cycle. Next. So this is obviously a similar graph to the one we reviewed under the current year's expenditures. So here's what things would look like if this were our reality next year. Because our salaries and benefits have increased next year, and because our expenditures are reducing based on our budget solutions, et cetera, our share of the total expenditures that we spend on salaries and benefits increases to almost 88%. So you recall it was 84% in the current year. We're almost at 88% in this model next year. Health and welfare, we go from 9.3% in the current year to 10.7% next year. And we'll look at that a little bit later. And the STRS and PERS, because of the state relief in this model, a slight increase from 9.3% to 9.8% of our total expenditures. Next slide, please. And just again, by way of comparison, our special ed enrollment, we're projecting to grow from 13% of our student population to 15% of our student population. And as a result, we would expect our expenditures in the special ed program area to rise, and they do, going from 20% of total expenditures to 22% of total expenditures. Next, please. So I just wanted to, we're hopeful again, and we expect that the legislator will present a better case and a better budget. I'm not arguing that this will be the best case scenario. I think this is just a best case scenario. So maybe it should be called a better case scenario. So a better case scenario is funding, just no cuts. So no deficit factor of the 7.92%. And we maybe don't receive any COLA, but maybe in exchange for not receiving that COLA, we still get to keep the PERS and STIRS share of the $2.3 billion that they gave us. So this is just a different look. So in a best case scenario, we'd be very close to that budget that we shared in January of a net activity that looked closer to minus $14 million and an ending balance that was somewhere, in the neighborhood of $29 to $30 million. And at this point, we would recommend that we still want to be focused on shoring up reserves for next year. And in addition to all those $8 million of reductions and solutions, we'd hope to find $6 million more in 2021, sort of regardless of where we find ourselves in the next month or so. But we'll revisit this certainly at our next presentation in June 25th. I know this is a lot. We're going to move now to next year. So next slide, please. Most economists have speculated, as you know, that the economic recovery will not be a V-shaped one, right? That is, the recovery won't be as quick and as upsloped as the recession was quick and downturned. So the more complicated the factors, obviously, that play into the recovery, the more prolonged the downturn and the slower the recovery. And that's what we're seeing now. So current estimates that we've heard are anywhere from 18 months to 24 months with respect to a recovery. Next, please. So therefore, as we mentioned, we anticipate some significant reductions being necessary for 21, 22, so the following year. And again, we'll know more in the next month or two, and certainly by September, we'll have a better idea, if not a good idea, of what's going to be necessary for the following year. But we just wanted to share tonight some ideas about some areas for consideration as we think about budget solutions for the future. And we've categorized these into 4 areas. Next, please. The first area is non-personnel considerations, health and welfare that we just mentioned. I'll review quickly. Budget standards, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. That's obviously the amount of discretionary resources that we allocate each year to the schools. So I think, doing a deep dive into those, how much we've allocated, how much has been remaining every year, is probably time well spent. Next slide, please. I think the larger piece of the pie has to be around health and welfare. This is just an example of the last 5 years, right? So over the past 5 years, these are the district's costs. So what has PUSD spent on health and welfare for our employees and their families over the past 5 years? And you can see in that time, we've increased our expenditures by 44% in that time, even though our enrollment in our health and welfare program, that's employees and their dependents, has grown by less than 20%. So I would just say that's not sustainable and certainly an area worth looking at and exploring moving forward. Next, please. Now we're going to move very quickly. Programmatic considerations. We've talked about these before when we did our budget workshop last year. Revisiting class sizes, right? We know that now we fall right in the middle of class sizes across the county, if not lower than that. Looking at our special education programs, specifically around staffing matrices and support. Looking at teachers on special assignment, which include our exploration program, and continuing to review our CTE program, especially vis-a-vis any additional reductions that are made to categorical grants related to those areas. Next, please. Support services considerations. So again, looking at our core staffing model and how we allocate support staff to our sites and what that looks like. Look at our maintenance and operations support organizational structures. Look at our general education busing. The general fund subsidizes the general education busing program by somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million a year. And then some other ideas that we'll obviously share in the future. One last slide. As we, to the President O'Connor Radcliffe's earlier comment, next slide, please. As we have these conversations, we have to keep in mind that we do have critical facility needs. And we know that we don't have all of the funding necessary to meet all of those critical needs over the next 2 to 3 years. While we have some resources, certainly, based on our school facilities program reimbursement and developer fees, et cetera, we fall far short compared to what we need. And so that's just needs to be part of the conversation, obviously, when we bring this back later this summer to discuss or early in the fall. All right, next steps then. We hope, next slide, please. We hope to be able to bring you an updated budget on June 25th. That will depend on what we get coming out of Sacramento and how soon we receive it. At that point, we'll also share some multi-year projections, which we're required to do, as you know, by the county and AB 1200. If there is no state budget approved by the end of June, which is, in the realm of possibility, then we would anticipate probably not being able to bring back a revised budget for the board's consideration. Probably would make sense to bring it back in September when we're revisiting unaudited actuals for 1920, and assuming that the dust has settled in Sacramento, certainly by August, allowing us some time to rebalance things. So if there is no budget changes by the end of June, you'll just pretty much see something similar to this at the June 25th presentation, and just refined around the edges. Next. So with that, Director Ramiro and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Little. I know that I have a lot, but I'll ask the first one based on what you just suggested, that we might not pass a budget until much later, months later from now. Do we have a waiver that allows us to do that?
No, we'd still, good question. We'd still have to bring a budget for approval. So we would bring pretty much this budget back to the board, knowing that it wasn't going to be a budget that we would live with for long. And then we would revise that budget in September based on the final state budget being approved.
Okay, well, rather than continue with my comments, I'll let other board members jump in here. Yeah, Mr. Zane.
Thank you, President O'Connor Radcliffe. Just a little thank you so much for, that was a lot to take in. And obviously when there's so much to take in, there was a lot of work behind it. So thank you for that. I just wanted to reference, I'm going to go by the, slide number in the lower right-hand corner of the PowerPoint. Both slides number 7 and slides number 20, which both show the total expenditures and transfers out, the 1920 estimated actuals, as well as the the preliminary budget first reading for 2021 total expenditures transfers out. And I mean, your words were 84% when you were reviewing slide number 7 was a good number. But just for the benefit of folks watching this, particularly those without any familiarity of the size and scope of some of these school district budgets, and who would scoff at calling 84% a good number for salaries and benefits, going as high as 87.7%. Can you, at least for the benefit of those watching, share some perspective in terms of how that compares, how Poway Unified specifically compares on these points with other districts?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question. I appreciate it. The short answer is that Poway Unified has a good track record, a solid track record of sort of aligning the salary and benefits expenditures of the district to that 85% number. So if we were to do a sort of a historical perspective, we've been in the range of 83 to 86% most often over the past many years. I think that School Services of California and other fiscal experts have said that, somewhere in the neighborhood of 85% to 86% is a good solid number in terms of those salary and benefit expenditures. They vary district to district. Some districts that I know of have as high as 92% that they spend on salaries and expenditures. I'm trying to think of a district that is most are within sort of our range, 85, 86%. I don't know of any districts that are much lower than 85%. So again, I think it's just one of those sort of standards and best practices that you use when assessing the fiscal health of a district and the general fund budget as a whole.
Well, and it's often been said that school districts, the work of education, they're largely people businesses. And so your largest costs are going to be people. But, how much, in looking at the increase of 84.1% to 87.7%, would you attribute to the actual increase in cost for salaries and benefits as opposed to an increase resulting from it's a higher percentage of this district's overall expenditures because our expenditures in other areas have had to reduce for revenue, et cetera?
Right. I'm trying to find the slide here. If we go back to the slide that shows on slide, looks like, where was it? If I recall correctly, I think we're looking, correct me if I'm wrong, Director Ramiro, we're looking at about an $8 or $9 million difference between our January budget proposal in terms of expenditures. Yeah, slide 16. And it's an $8.75 million delta between what we're projecting spending now in the new budget than we were in the old budget. Right, so just, doing some quick math, if you were to divide 8.75 by our total expenditure budget of 422 million, that's worth about, what, 1.5%? 1%. So I would say that 1% of that, somewhere between 1 to 1.5% of that 87.7% could be attributed to the fewer expenditures. And then the rest would be a result of, higher salary and benefit costs.
Thank you. Another question for you, if that's right, Ms. O'Connor. I'm just going to go through an order of some observations of the presentation. On slide 15, you reference the enrollment of 36,860 represents a growth of 0.75%. Does that anticipate any potential decrease in enrollment? Let's just say, for sake of conversation, if we had 10% who decided that after this distance learning experience, they decided that they were comfortable with homeschooling. Or is this growth of 0.75% reflective of some anticipation that we are going to potentially have a little shift in who chooses to go to school, or those who are choosing to distance learn, I presume, are also included as part of the district's enrollment?
That's correct. That's the approach we took. The enrollment growth reflects sort of just our average enrollment growth year over year of the 0.75%. And, it's a good question. And it's a big conversation. As you know, we did not change. Our attendance rate has been 96.7% pretty consistently every year. As much as we try to improve it, it's been 96.7. So we've made no assumption about kids not returning to school, other than, if that's the case, then again, it'll be another factor that impacts all school districts that the state will have to deal with at some level or another, whether it's funding based on enrollment, whether it's a 3-year rolling average, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just so complicated that we didn't include that particular assumption in this model.
Sticking with the same slide, number 15, it looks like it's one of the first instances where it's referenced that we may see a health and welfare cost increase of 5%. Really started to get into it a little bit more on slides 25 and 26 specifically. 2 questions with regard to this. Well, maybe one is a comment, and then the other is a question maybe for clarification. One, when we're looking at areas or ways of reducing our increase to health and welfare, I do hope, and we've had these conversations before, that maybe the district takes a harder look at VIVA as an option for the district. But specific to slide 26 and showing the increase, the district's cost from 2015 to the present, I'm curious if you can speak to whether or not that increase is a result of the cost of the benefits themselves, an increase to those benefits, the cost of them, as opposed to this necessarily, or not necessarily rather, being over that time period, the district having been more generous in its benefits provided to employees. It's my general understanding that the level of benefits has been fairly consistent over the years, but the district's cost for providing those benefits has gone up. I just don't want the public necessarily looking or reading that slide 26 and thinking that the reason for the increase in the district's cost is because we've gone from the Prius plan to the Cadillac plan.
Right.
No disrespect to the Prius drivers watching, but can you verify that?
No, I think that's a good question, and you're right. These increases, I would say, our plans have been pretty consistent over at least the last 3 years that we've been here, and I would extrapolate to the last 5 years. So we're looking at the costs, generally speaking, to maintain those programs for all of our employees and their dependents, based on the increased costs of those programs. But another way of looking at it, I had another slide that I didn't include. If you were to look at 2015, we were providing something, and I'll get these numbers a little off, but we were providing something like $12,500 for every employee for their benefits. And in 2020, that number was closer to $15,000 per employee who participated.
Excellent, thank you. Slide number 17 was one of the first references, I believe, to the reversal of the transfer to deferred maintenance. Ms. O'Connor-Ratcliffe alluded to this in her previous comments, but this is something less of a question, more just an observation, and to put some emphasis on it, that unfortunately we will be forced to, we felt going even before all of this hit, that putting a paltry $1 million annually to our deferred maintenance was insufficient or inadequate given the overall size of the district's budget and its deferred maintenance liability needs. This will certainly be exacerbated. This will exacerbate the situation. I was thinking recently that we just had completed the facilities master plan. And we come up with a schedule with Mr. Coster for all of these various projects that we wanted to accomplish throughout the district over the next several years. Some of that was perhaps wishful thinking predicated on the thought or belief that the district voters might approve being able to help us do or meet those schedules, those improvement schedules. And I don't mean to pull this overall, this high level budget discussion into a facilities discussion, but we're not going to be able to do a whole number of those projects, or at least have to defer them for quite some time until our budgetary situation improves and or until there's an appetite in the district to fund some more facility improvements through other means, through other than the general fund. And let me see, I think I maybe have one more observation. No, maybe tangentially related, but slide number 29. There's been lots of conversation. The board's been inundated with communications from the public with regard to conversations between the district and the city regarding the Poway Center for Performing Arts. Much of the communication coming in form of emails to board members to that point references the district's financial situation. And perhaps if just briefly, if you can touch upon how anything relating to that topic, or for many facility topics, generally speaking, aren't necessarily directly related to the budget that you're presenting us here today, in as much as they are directly impactful to Fund 40 within the district.
That's correct. We have various pots of money, as you know, for capital projects, capital acquisition, capital improvement projects, for maintenance, for deferred maintenance. Although, as you mentioned, we only have contributed $1 million a year for deferred maintenance, we spend multi-millions of dollars on our facilities each year on maintenance. They just happen to come from other funds and other district pots of money. So Fund 40 you mentioned, Fund 25, developer fees, CFDs to the extent that we can use them, et cetera, et cetera. So
I just want to clarify, sorry to interrupt, Ron, but when you say different pots of money for the public's sake, I want to say restricted pots of money, right? So I want to make sure that that's clear, that they don't think that there's district is hiding different pots of money. It's rather different pots of money that the state or federal government has put very strict restrictions around of how they can be spent, what they can be spent, and specifically what they're spent for. We're not talking about the pot of money of the general fund in which all of our salaries and all of our programs and all of the things to run the district come out of. So I just want to make sure that they clearly understand that as you're talking to that. It's important for the public to know these are restricted categorical pots of money.
Yes, thank you. That's correct. And I would just add to that a couple of points.
That is the reason, Dr. Phelps, I brought up that question with specific regard to slide 29, because it is confusing. And if we had the ability to pull from some of those other areas, we wouldn't be having the overall budgetary issues that we're having here, presented here in this PowerPoint. I'm sorry, Mr. Little.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say thank you for that clarification. We will, when we come back on June 25th, we will bring the board all of our budgets and all of our funds and all of our, what I call pots of money. So you'll see, and the public will see what's available and what's budgeted for each of those funds that are restricted for capital purposes that are not, like the general fund.
And when Mr. Little refers to capital projects or capital purposes, he's referring to like the the building of new buildings. And those new buildings are only able to happen based on utilizing those funds or based on increase of enrollment. Can you further clarify that, Ron?
Yes, that's true in relation to our CFDs. So the CFD money and the tax, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in our next presentation, is really about building school facilities and housing students based on the impact of development, right, in the area. And again, we'll go into a little more detail next presentation. But I just want to make one more point to Trustee Zane's point. You know, 6 years ago now, or maybe it's 8 years ago, the state used to give districts money for deferred maintenance. So part of the state's allocation every year for K-12 districts was, I remember where I was, it was $8 to $10 million of deferred maintenance money. And that was just part of the state allocation. And, it was what was a bare minimum really of what was necessary to keep schools in good functioning order. Since then, the new model, LCFF, there is no money, set aside for deferred maintenance. Districts are left on their own to divert some of the general fund dollars to maintenance if they so choose. And so districts across the state are left to come up with other ways of funding those projects. And hence the bond proposition, hence selling our property, right, the 4G property, and using that $6 million to help us keep our schools in good functioning, right? Hence,
so again, selling those properties and those kind of monies, they can only be used for facilities. So when people are talking about the PCPA, I want to just make two statements on that, because as we've received some emails and some of the public comments were referencing that, I just want to clarify the PCPA. It wouldn't even be a topic if the city didn't approach the district with the possibility of asking us to consider buying it. This is like, as people are complaining or has issues, they need to go directly to the city council. They need to go to the city of Poway. This is not a Poway unified situation. If anybody was asked to, and this is property that is on our land, right? And so the way we look at it as anyone approaches us with anything that would be considered as property to purchase, it would be used out of a pot of money that could only be used for facilities, not out of a general fund pocket. So it doesn't encroach or impact or have anything to do with the structural deficit that we're talking about. Let me just clearly state that. Number two, if anybody was approached with the possibility of purchasing facilities that is on their land that could benefit their students, why wouldn't the district at least engage in conversations that can increase VAPA experiences for their students and would improve the situation for the district? And purchasing it at a incredible price that wouldn't even be possible on the open market. So, the illustration that I gave to people is that if you live in a $700,000 house and the city came to you and you're paying rent for a $700,000 house every month, and they said, hey, I'm going to let you buy that house for $100,000. Would you not buy it for a steal? Like, it doesn't make any good business sense. We would be foolish to not consider purchasing a multi-million-dollar building that would benefit and expand the VAPA experiences for all of our kids. And so if they weren't putting it up for sale or weren't considering that, this would be a moot point. The district would have no reason to engage in conversations. So anyway, I just wanted to provide that clarification for the general public, as well as clarifying about where the money comes from. It has nothing to do with the pot of money that impacts salaries, programs, classes, student programs, the general fund where the majority of the money lies. It would only impact and affect the multi-million dollars that are sitting in our facilities funds.
Thank you, Dr. Phelps. It's more of a lengthy explanation than I was seeking when I asked the question originally. But Madam President, that's all the questions or observations I have on the budget at this time. And,
thank you, Mr. Zane. Any other questions? I have a lot, but again, I'm not going to take up everyone's time without letting other people speak like Mr. Zane. Dr. Patel?
Yes, I do have a couple questions. First, I am going to point out that Senator Atkins did put a press release where she announced a joint legislative agreement on the California budget. So that's good news. And she's released a quote also saying, and this is just an excerpt of the quote, "Our economy has been pummeled by COVID-19, but thanks to a decade of pragmatic budgeting, we can avoid draconian cuts to education and critical programs." I'm hoping that that's going to pan out, at least at some level. But with the guidance from the county that we're supposed to assume that the governors may revise is what we're working off of, I have some specific questions and concerns. One is I have a concern around the student services positions. I think with COVID-19 and all the anxiety and additional stress that our students are going through, I do have concerns about those two positions. I'd like to see us be able to retain student services as much as possible. I understand that we're looking at places to pare down the budget and look at efficiencies, but that's one area I would advocate, if we can, possibly to keep those staff members. I think that's very important right now. On the flip side, there may be some other areas where we're not able to utilize those programs and services because we're doing hybrid classroom learning situations, or because we are doing distance learning. So I would recommend looking at those areas. Perhaps it's, I don't know exactly what those areas are, but maybe we can look towards certain categories of funding that we're not using because we're in distance learning. And then to Board Member Zane's comment about VIBA, I know we're in conversations with other CSBA school board members in the San Diego County region, and they have indicated that there are conversations with VIBA to create some sort of reduction in health and welfare costs and expenses. So I would like to see us explore that. I know Mr. Zane and I joined several staff members in a meeting with VIBA. I believe it was last year. I think it's worth revisiting that to see if that can help us reduce our health and welfare expenses. And I think those are some of my specific points right now. I do appreciate Mr. Zane's comments. He took a lot of my questions, and it's nice to go second, I think, sometimes. Thank you. I might have another question after everyone else gets a turn. I'll come back.
No, you're done. You're done.
No more.
Oh, I guess Board Member O'Connor-Ratcliffe is going to take the rest of the time.
Ms. Couvret, Ms. Beatty, do you have questions or comments about the budget? No, nothing right now, Ms. Couvret?
I figure I'll wait till I hear after your questions and see if I have any left at that point.
Well, I appreciate the specificity that Mr. Zane referred to each slide. To be a lot more general about it, there is no chance, zero chance, that I will vote in 3 weeks to approve a budget that takes us down to 3.3 million in reserves. I will not. I will vote no. Please do not bring that to us. Even should we not know what the legislature is about to do, we need to find the cuts. How do I want to say it? I feel like I don't even want to say what we should be shooting for, but those reserves that we are calling robust reserves, that 9.2% reserves, they are meant to safeguard the district during times of trouble. And this is clearly a time of trouble. But the trouble, again, and you even said this, the trouble is not going to be over in 1 year. So it's predicted to affect the state and therefore our school funding for at least 2 to 3 years. So we cannot, should not, can't spend 100% of our reserves in the first year of this downturn. We must make some cuts so that we have to plan for several years of trouble here with the hope that we can begin rebuilding our reserve after that. But we need to have some amount of reserve that we can save things a little bit at a time over at least a few years. We can't use 100% of the reserves in year one. I can't vote for that. I don't think it's responsible. I know the cuts are going to hurt. The ones you've already mentioned that you built in, those hurt. But I think I saw on one of the slides, I can't remember which one, 8.5 million, even to get us to that state minimum reserve level, whether that's been waived by the county or not. The state minimum, that's lower than I'm comfortable going in our reserves. I think we have to make the hard cuts, and I know we don't want to. But if the state does not give us what we're looking for, we can't throw up our hands and say, oh, sorry, there's nothing we can do. There is something we can do, and we must do it.
Well, with all due respect, President O'Connor-Ratcliffe, the state has given a waiver to go below that 2%, and there's a reason, because they know that no districts can do it without that. So that being said, though, our district does have a higher reserve than most other districts do, but with the budget that the governor has asked us to look at, we can only do what we can. And just respectfully to say, our district is also one of the leanest as far as staffing goes compared to other districts. So there's really very minimal places that we can go to make cuts. Those cuts would include, cutting and eliminating and laying off or furloughing employees. It would include increasing class sizes, but those are really the only places that this district can look at. There's really not a lot of padding that this district have. We don't have an excess of a lot of extra programs. We apply for every grant possible. So I just want you to know, which I know you already know, that we're fighting with the legislators, and I think that they know that the majority of the districts would go under.
I understand that, and I think that's terrible, but I don't want to use our $42 million in reserves next year with, again, the wink and a prayer, let's throw some salt over our shoulders and hope that the legislature bails us out, because we're not even as bad as some of the other districts. I don't feel comfortable doing that. I think we need to look at the cuts that we're going to have to make to have some reserve left for year two. Because if we don't, if in year two we have to find $42 million in 1 year just to keep our doors open, how are we going to feel about that? If we could have saved some of that initially for next year, I really think we need to find it. I know it's not easy to find. We are lean. We know this. We've been lean for quite a while. And it's going to be really, really difficult. It is going to hurt to get leaner. And I can't think of one area where I'd want to cut. But we have to. The reality is that we have to.
Could I just say, in addition to waiving the reserve requirement, the County Office of Ed is also not allowing us to, which they have done in the past, to sort of put in budget solutions, to your point, right? So I bring that up.
Name them.
Yeah, because the point is to really try to bring a budget that's accurate based on, if we have to, based on the May revise on June 25th, and do what we can with respect to cutting and making changes, and then hopefully things get better and bring a revised budget forth in September. So that's sort of the plan as it stands, knowing that, things will get better based on what's coming out of Sacramento. But, obviously our recommendation was still to look at $6 million of reductions for next year.
So I thank you for that. But am I to understand, based on what you just said, that you're going to ask us to potentially, at least, barring any changes, approve a budget that we intend to change in September anyway?
Yes.
So to approve something that is a very temporary, basically a false budget.
If there's no final budget from the state, if the state has not passed the Senate, the state bill, the budget bill, then we will bring this budget back for approval, recognizing that it's very temporary, and we will not have identified $6 million of reductions in 2 weeks' time. So it'll be very similar to what you see today, unfortunately. But hopefully, we get a budget bill out of the state in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be able to bring back a different budget.
Ms. Akins, did I see you waving your hand?
Yes. This is obviously a devastating report, but off of what Mr. Little just said, with Governor Newsom's meeting with the congressional committees coming up, would that give us any hope for a better budget or anything, or would it just okay?
Yeah, no, it's definitely hopeful. So the other two branches have put together budgets that are, on the opposite side of what the governor proposed. So typically when this happens, they kind of meet in the middle somewhere. So
right now, the Senate and the Assembly have put together proposals to the governor to consider. And if the governor accepts that, we're looking at potentially our budget will go back to what it was. So it will be a lot better than what it currently is, which is why we're anticipating that mid-month, it should look different before we bring it back forward to the board again. So with that, can we move on?
It looks like we can. And at this time, it's been 2 hours since we began the meeting. I'd like to call a 5-minute recess. Are we, we're waiting on TJ still? Okay, and, okay, never mind. We're waiting on a couple still. Looks like we're all back. Are we missing anybody? No? Good to go? Hey, you count us down, Jennifer.
Okay, just confirming we're ready to, if we paused. Okay, we are ready when you are, Madam President.
Okay, thanks. We're back, and we'll resume on item 7.2. This is the Community Facilities District Special Tax Reduction Plan. Mr. Little, I anticipate a lot less angst over this one.
I hope so. I hope it's better news. I think we have some team members joining us. We have Adam Bauer, our municipal advisor from Fieldman Roll-Up, and his associate Rachel Chang, who are going to help us in the presentation. There he is. All right, good. So we have them. So this evening, staff is pleased to provide the board with a conceptual framework for accelerating the termination of many of our community facility districts and improvement areas. As you know, our CFD program has been in existence since 1987 and has provided the resources necessary to accommodate robust enrollment growth over the past 3 decades by providing the resources necessary to construct schools and other infrastructure to meet the needs of our growing district. With our enrollment somewhat plateauing for the foreseeable future, and given the constraints on the use of CFD funds that we talked about in the prior agenda item, over the past year, staff and our consulting team here have really spent our time analyzing how best to utilize the special taxes that we receive from our CFD and IA homeowners, with an eye on paying off the existing debt related to those CFAs sooner than originally planned. And so this agenda item for this evening is for informational purposes only. And with that, we're going to jump right into the presentation. So next slide, please. All right, so this just shows you the history of our community facility districts and improvement areas, our very first one being established in 1987, and our most recent IAs being formed as early as 2012. I think, as you know, we have about 36% of our residents who live in our CFD and IA areas, and 45% of our students attend schools in those areas. Since 1989, obviously after we got our first bonds sold, the CFDs have helped fund the construction of 14 new schools and the expansion of 4 other schools. And we've also funded a lot of non-school facilities and infrastructure. Next, please. So obviously we accomplished all that construction by issuing bonds and using those bond proceeds to fund those projects. The proceeds from the sale of special tax bonds are generally used for new construction. We talked about expansion or capital projects related to enrollment growth. We then assess our homeowners the special taxes to service that debt. And as per our CFD covenants, so the foundational documents for each of those CFDs, we are charged to protect our bondholders, primarily to levy a 110% rate of special tax to service that debt. We have $400 million, over $400 million in outstanding debt. And as we note, without any repayment options, we would be looking at 2046 before all of it would be fully retired. Next slide, please. So we just sort of we're cutting to the chase here. Here's what this plan will accomplish if it's enacted as we envision. So under this plan, we envision the early termination of every CFD and every IA anywhere from 5 years early, as in the case of CFD IA number 6, or as early as 30 plus years in advance of when scheduled. So just looking at CFD 10 IA, there's a 32-year difference between when we anticipate ending the program and when we'd be able to accomplish the program. Another example, CFD, what's another good example? CFD 13. We're anticipating at this point, based on our current schedule, termination of 2048. Under this model, we'd be able to terminate that particular CFD in 2026, so 23 years early. So we're going to quickly talk through how we envision this working. And to help us do that, actually, at this point, I'm going to introduce Adam, who's going to take us through, he and Rachel, I believe, the next series of slides. Welcome, Adam, and I'll turn it over to you at this point.
Great, thank you, Mr. Little. And if we could turn, before we turn off to slide 3, I just want to add an additional point. For some of the CFDs that have a very high number for projected years of prepaid, when we did our analysis, when you're looking at 38 CFDs with the complexity that your district's program has, we had to make some assumptions. And so some of these CFDs have not actually sold their debt yet. But in order to work on our model, we applied the same standards to those. So those you would actually have mitigation agreements with developers that we're not going to be able to cut those off 37 years early. We still have some things to do on those. But to make the model work so we can have a conversation like this, we had to come up with some assumptions. And I just want to make sure we explain that. If we can turn to slide 4. Slide 4 really starts to explain some of the complexity of the school districts program. A lot of school districts have a lot fewer CFDs, and they only have one layer of debt, and that would be called the senior bonds. And so in many cases, a community facilities district or an improvement area will sell bonds, and then that's it. We're done. With this district, with the complexity of the facility needs that you had, the number of CFDs you had, you actually, in many cases, did subordinate debt. So for the revenue that's in excess of what's needed for the senior bonds is then used to repay the subordinate debt. And as Mr. Little detailed, your CFDs are set up so that you shall levy the tax that applies to both of those. So some CFDs are set up so you just levy for the senior bonds, and then anything that you don't need there, you actually reduce the tax. In this case, we must levy for the full amount. That second part of the full amount actually then goes towards these financing authority type debt that we've detailed here. So within that, so now you have this, I want to make sure we're clear. You have a senior debt in a lot of these and a subordinate debt. And in some cases, you don't have any subordinate debt. So I'll explain that in a minute. So now we've broken down in that next bullet point there, we've broken down the district's CFDs into 3 different categories. There's what we call the JAA districts. And those are the districts that have senior debt, but then also are subject to a joint acquisition agreement. I'll call that JAA for the rest of the presentation. Then there's other CFDs that have senior debt and then are subject to an agreement for the 2012 Certificates of Participation, or COP districts. Finally, there's other debt that in some cases has no senior debt yet, but then also is not a party to the JAA or the agreement to repay the 2012 COPs. And so those are what we call surplus districts or available districts throughout the presentation. So this here is the framework for how we look at everything going forward. The presentation is set up so we deal with it in 3 different sections. So if we can turn to slide 5, please. Slide 5 shows how each district is classified. And what we've done here is we said, which district. So for example, CFD 1 did not have a subordinate structure to it. It's just had its senior debt. CFD number 2 was a party to the JAA agreement. And then you can see, I don't want to give you 38 different examples, but that's an overview of kind of how we broke it down. And then from this, we then take each one of these categories and break them out into 3 sections. For slide 6, please. So we have the debt that's already issued. Mr. Little's already outlined that we're looking towards how quickly can we repay this debt so we can lower taxes for taxpayers. But the other thing that the CFDs are beneficial for is funding additional projects. And so that first bullet point addresses, we're first going to look at obligations of those, I'm going to call them financing districts for CFDs and improvement areas, financing districts. Then we look at other future facilities that are needed. And this may change over time. This is one of the key factors as we look at this on an annual basis. We'll need to evaluate, are there more facility needs or not? And then after you've taken both those 2 factors into consideration, you can look at the ability to repay or terminate the special taxes, repaying it early. So we look at that on an annual basis. What we've done below is we have already identified Del Sur Elementary School that has a need to be built. And so we've looked at some of the CFDs and try to apportion the cost to those CFDs for a total of $12 million to say, we're going to build, when we want to show you a model like this, we want to build in this facility need that we know you have. And so if the cost doesn't come in exactly $12 million, this will adjust. And then the next time we show you the model, we can show you how that changed throughout the model. So if we could turn to the next slide, please. So after all the senior debt is serviced or paid for, we then look at the $40 million of the PFA bonds. And then from there, we show how that starts to get repaid. And in previous reports, we've talked about $6.75 million in state reimbursement. There's a balance in the funds already. There's another fund called Coverage Stabilization Fund, and there's $3.6 million in that. We've now set aside some money for Del Sur, and in 19, 20, and 21, we show you what those surplus taxes do. They get set aside until we reach the full amount that it takes to repay the PFA in October 1, 2023. But you probably noticed in 22 and 23, we have zeros down there. The JAA does not allow for prepayment to January 1st, 2023. So once we have enough money, we no longer continue setting it aside for subordinate debt. We now sweep it aside for the other obligations that we've talked about. And with that, I will turn it over to Rachel Chang-Kui to walk through some of the details of the other sections. Rachel, you might be on mute.
Thank you very much for the reminder. And if we can move to the next slide, page 8, please. As presented by Mr. Little earlier, the next step in the process is to evaluate reducing special taxes for each of the districts. And for the purposes of this presentation, on the table below is a detailed summary of the special tax reduction plan for the 10 different JAA districts. The districts are listed, and just to orient ourselves through this table, I will not repeat all the details for the following slides, but I thought that I would walk everyone through the information in this first table for the JAA district. Of all the 10 districts, on the first column here, you see the final maturity of the senior debt. Some of these districts have more than one series of senior bonds outstanding, and those are reflected here. Each of the bonds have a par optional call date. A lot of these financings, when they were issued originally, the district is restricted to repay them until 10 years from the original issuance. And those par optional call dates are referenced here. After reviewing, much special taxes can be reserved along with other funds on hand to repay and reduce the special taxes for the districts. The projected call dates are also referenced here. The resulted special tax savings and the number of years prepaid are also the last two columns in this particular table.
And just to pick two examples here, looking at the first line item, CFD number 2, the final maturity of the senior bonds is in 2028. We can exercise your call redemption ability in 2025. Based on the special tax projections, in 2025, we will have sufficient funds to repay the senior debt. This will result in $40 million of special tax savings or 17 years of years prepaid. Next slide, please. Using the same thought process as we just explained for the JAA district, now looking at the COP districts. In way of background, to fund projects and to repay prior financings, the 2012 COP was originally issued in the amount of roughly $57.3 million. The final maturity of those COPs is in 2043. These COP, unlike the JAA financings and the rest of the district's financings, these have a short-term interest rate lock. On two separate occasions, the school district entered into these rate locks agreement with U.S. Bank. Without getting into too much details, the current rate lock will expire in 2022. It's certainly the hope that we will have sufficient funds so that the school district can repay it before having to reconsider what options to refinance or repay the 2012 COPs in 2022. However, based on our analysis, there will not be sufficient funds to repay in 2022. Next slide, please. Nevertheless, the same table that Adam just presented for the JAA district, we will have sufficient funds based on these projections by fiscal year 2030-31 to repay the 2012 COP early. If you look to the table, these include some of the projected net revenues coming from future years, as well as special taxes that are currently in your lease revenue bond custodial accounts, as well as debt service reserve fund. Just to explain the two zeros that you see in this table, net revenues from 2019, those revenues are available to you. What has happened because fiscal year 2018-19 has ended, those surplus, roughly 1.94 million of them, have been transferred and is now shown as a part of your special tax in the LRB custodial accounts. As well as looking forward, similar to the JAA, although you're not able to repay the COP until 2031, we will have sufficient taxes through 2030. 2031 net revenues will be utilized to repay senior bonds. Next slide, please. Same process. After servicing the subordinate debt, here is a summary of the reduction plan for each of the districts related to the 2012 COP. Here is a list of 12 districts, and without getting into all the details, the final maturity of the bonds, they range from 2031 to 2042, and the par optional call dates range from 2023 to 2026. The projected to call when it is closer to the final maturity as compared to the JAA district as a function of the available net revenues that is projected to come from these districts. Nevertheless, the district can expect, based on this plan, if they're executed as is today, to save roughly $188 million of special taxes, and the projected year prepay range roughly from 5 to 16 years. Next slide, please. Last but not the least, the third category, the surplus CFD and improvement area districts. In addition to the districts we just reviewed, there are 16 districts remaining. 13 of those have only senior debt outstanding, and 3 others have no outstanding debt at this time. Based on the approach that we shared previously, this is the plan that will be reevaluated annually. Nevertheless, at the current circumstance, the reduction plan is listed on the following slide. If we can move to slide number 13, please. Reducing the available surplus district special taxes, since we do not have subordinate debt to service, we can look at what is the earliest date to be able to exercise your optional call ability, and also looking at how much special taxes are projected to come from these lists of 16 districts. From CFD number 1, as an example, the final maturity of the senior bond will happen this year in 2020. And the par optional call date has already passed, which was October of 2018. Based on the analysis, the school district will have sufficient fund to repay all of the CFD number 1 senior debt this year. With that, that will allow the school district to terminate the CFD 1 taxes potentially and saving $47 million or 21 year of special tax reduction. Looking at the surplus special districts, there are roughly $300 million of special tax savings projected. And as Adam mentioned earlier, this table includes districts that do not have any senior debt issue. However, based on agreements and arrangement made at the time of CFD formation, there would be requests from the developer in order to fund non-school improvements. And those specifically are CFD number 15, Improvement Area B, as well as Improvement Area D. Nevertheless, to apply a level ground assumption, we have included them as potential reduction districts to be evaluated. With that, I will hand it back to Adam to go over next slide, number 14.
I'll jump in. Yeah, thank you. So finally, just to reiterate, so CFD program here at Poway Unified is a mature program. It served us well for over 30 years. We have plateaued in terms of enrollment growth, but as you know, we still have some facilities needs that we've taken into account in this plan. As you saw, we can generate somewhere close to $1.1 billion of savings to our CFD and IA homeowners in this plan. And the nice thing about it, this is just an evolving template to be revisited each year. But it is doable and it does provide a roadmap to guide us as we move forward in servicing the debt related to our CFDs and looking at retiring our program early. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Little, Mr. Bauer, Ms. Chang-Kui. I do have one I want to make sure I understand. When we're talking about making sure that we've built in the needs for an additional classroom building at Del Sur Elementary, for instance, we're assuming at this time that that's the only thing that we're going to need in the future in our CFD areas. So is there enough flexibility at this point to account for some future currently unanticipated new facilities needs? There is still that flexibility. I'm seeing you nodding your head. So I was just checking, do we still have that flexibility, or would we then need to fall back on the same types of facilities funding of non-CFD areas?
You want to address that, Adam?
Yeah, so as both Rachel and I have detailed, we need money to accumulate for a number of years before we start paying down any debt. And so because of that, we aren't doing anything immediate. We're accumulating money until we get to those call dates or we've aggregated enough money to do so. And so I think on an annual basis, we should ask ourselves that question is, are there other facilities? But then especially the year before we actually take that money and pay down that debt, we should do that double check, like really, are there no other facilities to be considered here? And then so I think the short answer to your question is yes. I was just trying to lay out the framework for how we might think about that.
No, I appreciate that, and that's helpful. We're not deciding the framework today. We're going to keep looking at it year after year because we never know when a golf course is going to be retired and turned into high density high rises somewhere, and obviously totally unaccounted for. We had no idea that would happen. And if that should happen before we retire all of the CFD debt, depending on which CFD, and I understand some of them can only be used to retire the original debt, but some of them can be used for new growth. At that point, we would still have an opportunity to use it. But if this happened, if that kind of thing happened beyond this point, we would be left on the same footing as in our non-CFD areas.
We would be dependent on developer fees then, right, to help us, right?
Right. Got it. Okay. Thank you. I like the flexibility angle.
So I had
board members? Yes, Ms. Beatty.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to thank Ms. Superintendent Little for his work on this. So I wanted to also convey my gratitude to Mr. Bauer and Ms. Chang for your work. I know this must have been an absolutely incredible undertaking. I remember 6 or 7 years ago when a flurry of articles came out about Melrose, and it was disclosed that we had 222 separate Melrose bank accounts. So I have no doubt that just unpacking all of this was just, a massive endeavor, going into a black hole. So it's really incredible work. Just to follow up on that, I'm curious what I guess a couple of things come to mind. And maybe these aren't questions that you can answer because, it precedes your tenure here, but do you have a notion as to why clearly these pots of money, the imposition of taxation was inaccurate. They overassessed how much money they needed to collect in these CFDs. And even some of the districts like Willow Grove, the parents had to, barnstorm and petition the district to build their school. And every time a school was built over there, immediately there was, the school was over impacted, like Stone Ranch and Monterey Ridge elementary schools that just overnight, soon after they opened, had in excess of 1,000 students. So, we had to put in trailers and stuff. So I don't know if, you could sort of address that asymmetry in the planning process if there's an explanation.
Well, maybe I'll try from a macro perspective to address this, and I think you'll be able to pull out some details on your program. If we could go back and be a part of the team many years ago that was doing this, there's certainly some flexibility points we would have tried to build in that you don't have in your program. But once you have this all set up, you have to live within the confines of the agreements that are in place. And what a team at that point in time was trying to do was make sure that the school district had the CFD program would be able to fund all your facilities. In a lot of cases, the state hasn't always been a timely partner. And a lot of districts have gotten in a situation where they count on the state funding 50% of a project. And then that doesn't happen. Sometimes it doesn't happen. And then sometimes it does happen, but it could be 5 to 10 years later. And so your programs, working all 38 of them together, along with your very successful state funding application and award program, has made it so that I would say, I think you're looking at it, and when you describe overpaying, you're saying in the current year they're paying more than they might have otherwise had to. Mm-hmm. But what that did was it got them those facilities, and now on the back end, we'll be able to pay it all off earlier. But a team, when they're setting these up, especially in the era when some of yours were set up, some of these were done in the very early days of CFDs. One, hadn't seen what a lot of other districts had done to build in those flexibilities, and because there wasn't a lot of districts doing it at the time. But then 2, a lot of other districts weren't as successful on so many fronts. So sometimes you get a CFD formed, and then you have 3/4 of the property around it that don't have a CFD. And so that makes it very difficult to fund those facilities. For your facility program, a lot of great things came together to make it so you have that opportunity to repay bonds early and lower taxes early. So I might not be answering it exactly the way you asked the question, but Hope it helps.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I wonder what comes to mind when you mention the lack of flexibility. I'm sure it's numerous things, but one of the things is the Melrose law says the increase, a 2% increase may be imposed. It's discretionary. And all of our resolutions of formation, the binding contractual documents, said that the 2% was mandatory. Is that the sort of inflexibility?
No, that one, and that's investors we're gonna have a really difficult time selling bonds if we don't build in. If we have bonds that have a 2% escalator on them, and then your taxes don't have a 2% escalator on them, or guaranteed 2% escalator on them, that'll make it very difficult to sell bonds. Some areas where some flexibility would be nice is not having money, forced to be transferred at certain moments in time. Also, that once we hit certain coverage ratios, maybe we could free up some of the CFDs from being, or a portion of the CFDs. So instead of saying all CFDs are going to secure this at all times, if we're able to say, hey, we have 175% coverage on this, now that we have that level of coverage, now we can drop it early for everyone. Those are the types of things that aren't built in. But that 2%, I mean, almost any CFD has an escalator on it. It's going to kind of have that requirement built in.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you again for your work.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you for all this work. It is very exciting to see a potential of $1.1 billion in savings to our taxpayers. I say potential because, as you said in your presentation, this plan has to get implemented in time. My question or clarification is, you've listed some of these as in their 3 various categories, but each CFD would get triggered as and when it would be ready. Is that correct? We would act upon them independently.
That's correct.
Okay. So one would not be dependent on another.
The subordinate debt.
For the subordinates, yes.
But once the subordinate debt's taken away, then they're standalone.
Okay. And I echo Board Member O'Connor-Ratcliffe's concerns because I know we've talked about classroom needs at Del Norte, potential engineering portable replacements at Westview. So definitely we would want to keep an eye on what our facilities needs are. And I'm glad that this is just a plan and there are a lot of things to work on before we start implementing. But thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation.
Adam, did I hear you say at one point that perhaps Sacramento didn't move quickly enough?
No.
It never happens.
I don't know if I heard that correctly.
We're on YouTube. This isn't getting published. The state program is a matching program, and the match doesn't always correspond with the need immediately.
Shocking. That's shocking.
Any other board member questions or comments on this presentation? This is not an action item, but I think we're all very excited for the potential here for helping our CFD taxpayers. So thank you very much for this work. This is great. Yeah, this is gonna make a lot of people pretty happy when it starts rolling. Yeah, so thank you so much. Let's move along then to item 8.1. California School Boards Association New Board Policy 6157, Distance Learning. Ms. Osborne.
Thank you. Board Policy 6157, Distance Learning, is a new policy that's been developed by CSBA and reviewed by staff. This reflects our current distance learning plan as well as provides guidance for the future. This new policy was presented last month as a first reading and is presented tonight as an action item.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Osborne? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve? Motion by Mr. Zane. Is there a second? Second by Dr. Patel. Any further discussion at this time? All right, for a preferential vote, Ms. Akins.
Aye.
Thank you. And for everyone else, all in favor? That's 6-0. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 8.2 is proposed adoption of high school psychology textbook, first reading. Ms. Osborne.
Thank you, Madam President. As we continue to support updating instructional materials, tonight's recommendation is presented based on input from teachers and staff after the review to ensure alignment with California standards. We are recommending the text Thinking About Psychology for Psychology 1-2 at Westview High School. This is a first reading.
Thank you very much. This is a non-voting item, obviously. Any questions or comments? Dr. Patel.
I just have one comment. I actually clicked on all the links and went through the textbook. I thought it was pretty cool that the authors themselves were teaching some of the lessons. And I think, being an old school, where you get your textbook, you have no idea who these people are. And I thought that was kind of neat to hear from the experts themselves and their presentations of the materials. I also like the flexibility that it offers teachers because they can import in various modules and then supplement with their own materials. So it gives the instructors a lot of flexibility. So I'm intrigued to see how this rolls out. It's a new style of learning, new types of textbooks. It's pretty cool. Kudos to the staff for settling on this. It's pretty cool.
I also spoke with teachers from Westview, and what I heard was that this was by far the best thing that they reviewed, the best text. So I'm very pleased that everybody likes it so much. So yeah. All right. Any other comments or questions? All right, moving on then. 8.3, Poway Unified School District COVID-19 Operations Written Report for 2019-2020. First reading, Ms. Osborne.
Thank you. Executive Order N5620 was established on April 22nd, 2020. It addressed the impact of continued school closures in response to COVID-19 pandemic and district's ability to conduct meaningful annual planning and the ability to meaningfully engage our stakeholders in the processes. The executive order issued a timeline and approval of waivers for the local control and accountability plan. The executive order also established the requirement that districts adopt a written report, COVID-19 operations written report, explaining to the community the changes to program offerings made in response to our school closures and the major impacts of closures on our students and families. I'd like to thank Director Mercedes Hubschmidt for her leadership and with the development of this report and the contributions across all of our departments. We presented a draft to the parents in our district advisory and our district English learner advisory, and they've provided us feedback that has been included in this report. Tonight, we present this report to you as a first reading. So we will not be bringing an LCAP this year. It's been postponed until December 2020.
Thank you, Ms. Osborne. I am still interested in our pre-COVID thought exchange data. Will we be hearing that at any point? I realize a lot of it is probably moot at this point, but will we be hearing any of that?
Yes, we have all of that data and we have it themed, and we were moving forward with our LCAP and getting ready for the development. And so we have all of that information. We can put it on our website under our LCAP, and so people can see that. I know we have another thought exchange that has just gone, but we can put that up there so it's transparent as well.
Thank you. I would appreciate knowing where we thought we might be heading before all of this happened, in the hopes that we can get back to that point again sooner rather than later. So thank you for that. Any other comments or questions for Ms. Osborne on this item? Dr. Patel.
Yeah, I have a kind of a high level question as to just the purpose, the spirit of the document. It's explained very well what processes we put in place. Is there any goal in this document to show the outcomes of some of the processes, or is that for a future revisiting of the document or future version of the document? Like we put in that we served meals to a certain number of students, that we put processes in place to serve meals, but we didn't talk about our how many of those meals went to, say, actually the kids who needed them versus people we don't have documented as needing them, but perhaps now need them. There's no the efficacy of it.
that this came out relatively quickly as far as what the expectations were and the template, and it's very limited in scope. As you can see, it's 4 pages. Each section is limited to 300 words, and we had many more than 300 words when we were gathering all of the data to tell our story. So that's been one of my considerations too, is how do we more fully tell the story of all that has happened. So perhaps a video story or something that we could do that would be more comprehensive to tell the story of all of the things, because I talk with principals and there are many stories of special things that have happened during this time and the outreach that has happened. So I think that may be another opportunity for us.
My only concern would be, as we advocate for more interventions due to the impacts of COVID-19, we don't have that supporting document in here, and the state may be referencing this document to look at what our needs were, and they may see, oh, well, you did all these things, and think that, right, that we didn't need more funding to get them done. So I just thank you for clarifying that you were very limited in the word content as well as the scope of the document in general. Thank you.
I'm wondering why we decided not to publish it for the general public, that they couldn't see the working document unless they come to the district office. But it wasn't published online.
It was taken to our advisory groups for input. So, because that's one of the concerns that they had around the LCAP is how do we bring people together and have meaningful input during this time? So that's one of the challenges and why they said, if possible, meet with your advisory groups. And so that's what was done with the draft.
Oh, they meaning the state Department of Education.
Correct.
Okay. Because I was just looking at the online docket, but when I had looked at it before, my feedback was that I would prefer, there lacked sort of a clear chronological timeline of when we opened up after we closed March 16th. Sort of referenced the closure, it referenced guidance to teachers to make contact with their students, and then some vague reference about a soft opening in early April, but it kind of lacked that specificity. And I thought if we could work that into it, it would just provide some clarity of the chronological timeline.
Okay.
And as Board Member Patel mentioned, understanding that I can't remember if it was a hard rule of a 300 word limit or a guidance, but it's not a lot.
We can look at it for the timeline.
Thank you, Ms. Osborne. I'm seeing a wonderful project for Ms. Peck's office over the summer. Any other comments on this item? We will see this again at the end of this month, then at our second meeting. Okay, great. Seeing nothing else. 8.4, 2020-2021 Reopening Planning Committee. Ms. Osborne, the $90 million question.
And it's a work in progress. Thank you, Madam President. Tonight, we just wanted to provide a brief overview of the work that has begun with our development of our 2020-21 Reopening Planning Committee. The charge for this committee is to develop plans to safely and effectively reopen our schools when authorized to do so by state and county officials for the new school year. The committee is a collaborative effort working with staff across departments as well as our partners in PFT and PSEA. Our first step has been to gather data from all of our stakeholders regarding returning to school for the new year. A parent survey went out to gather data for each student enrolled and to rank in order their preference for how PUSD should deliver instruction and or services as a district. We had a great return rate. 91% of our 36,500 students were accounted for in the survey. The first choice regarding our instructional delivery models, 59% preferred in-classroom, on-campus learning. 25% for blended learning, and 16% for a virtual learning model. The second choice for our students' parents, 64% for blended learning model, 19% in classroom on campus, and 17% for a virtual learning model. The comfort level for students to return to campus was ranked on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being very comfortable, and 58% ranked a 4 to 5 as their comfort level to return. We also surveyed teachers and classified staff with similar questions. The comfort level for teachers to return to campus, 50% of teachers feel comfortable returning following CDC guidelines in place. That was a level of 4 to 5. The first choice for teachers, 57% selected in classroom learning model. And their top rated second choice was 63% for blended learning. Our classified staff also were asked those same questions, and focusing on our classified staff that are supporting classroom learning. 52% felt comfortable returning to school. They ranked it as a 4 or a 5 on that sliding scale. And the first choice was 46% for classroom learning, and the top rated second choice was blended learning at 57%. So with this data, we are now beginning to plan for what might the schedules and logistics look like. So we have a subgroup that is made up of folks that represent the different levels of elementary, middle, and high school, as well as our PFT, to start thinking about how do we organize those learning models for on-campus if the guidelines are currently what they are, or as they change, and how do we plan for blended learning and virtual learning. We also have our facilities and operations subgroup. They're working on plans for cleaning, sanitizing the campuses, transportation, and organization. Our goal will be to have a plan that we can bring back and present to the board and the public by the June 25th board meeting. Any questions?
Ms. Couvret.
Obviously we're asked this question all the time as far as what's it going to look like in the fall. And I'm always very proud to say is we're not making decisions too early, because we keep getting information every day and we seem to be opening up more and more. And I'm afraid there might be some confusion. A lot of people want to go back to school, but they don't necessarily. I think going back to school as it was in January versus going back to school with kids in face masks, staying 6 feet apart, not being able to play together is very different than going back to school in January. And I want to make sure that as we poll people, we understand those differences. I understand where a lot of that isn't up to us to make that decision, but I think that will make the decision if people choose to do distance learning versus go back to school, even though they originally said they want to go back to school. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And that's our plan. This first survey that we put out to our parents around what is their preference for students, are knowing how the information is changing on a daily basis, weekly basis. We have let parents know that we will be surveying again in July once we have a clear picture. We're also planning for Abraxas that opens in July and Valley that opens August 1st. So we are working with them to make sure that we are prepared, and we will survey our parents again once we have more information as it unfolds.
It's important, though, that people recognize and realize that, because a lot of the emails we get, parents are demanding that we make that local decision to reopen our schools. I think it's important to remind the public that we must follow the CDC. It's really upon the governor to issue that order. And right now, his order does not allow schools to reopen in its normal fashion or reopen at this point. So it's important that people know that we're not in the phase yet where the governor has allowed or issued a change in the order. So it's interesting, though, because things change regularly. You know, we can have weddings now, we can have funerals now, we can have protests with thousands of people, but we can't open our schools. So it's, I know a little frustrating for a lot of people, but unfortunately, we do have to follow the CDC and the governor's executive orders.
I have just one more question. With regard to, as you're looking at these different models, are you taking consideration our budgetary constraints as we look at that we just heard today?
Yeah,
Yes.
we have to take in consideration our budgetary constraints, but our hope is that if the requirements is to reopen with certain stipulations in place, that the government, it will provide some funding to accommodate those necessary and extra expenditures.
Great, thank you.
I also just want to share the data that we shared here tonight, and we are going to be sharing that with the public because we know that they did the survey and they would like to see. So we'll be providing a summary to our families and staff.
Thank you, Ms. Osborne. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Will we have a more kind of organized plan for what the blended learning would look like next meeting for the public to know?
Yes, that's one of the things that we've received in the thought exchange, and we're surveying our students as well and our teachers about improvements for online learning. I think we're going to call it blended learning and virtual learning so that we can kind of transition from this emergency time because we will be thinking about grades being back in place as well. But we want to learn from what's happened and make sure that we are strengthening the learning experience if it's, online or virtual or blended.
And one more thing, sorry. I know we've gotten a lot of concerns over the credit, no credit system. Would we be providing some kind of compensation for those kids who would rather have a grade, or are we just sticking to the credit, no credit system? So I know that a lot of parents were concerned with GPAs and college acceptances and all that kind of stuff.
We've had discussions that because we will have more time for planning and organization, and now that our teachers have had this experience, they know more about planning for the essential learnings and the types of assignments and so on to give. We will be moving back to a grading system and not doing credit, no credit for online learning in the future.
All right, if there are no other questions or comments, I don't see any. All right, 11.1, approval of regular board meeting dates for 2021. This is our second reading, so it is an action item. Dr. Phelps?
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight we bring the 2021 regular board meeting dates for a second reading and board action.
Any questions?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Zane. Is there a second? On a motion by Mr. Zane, second by Dr. Patel. Any discussion? Although Ms. Akins won't be here for these meetings, you do have a preferential vote.
Yes, aye.
Thank you. And for everyone else, all in favor? 1, 2, that's 5. That's unanimous. 6-0. Thank you. This brings us to our board member reports, 12.1. Shall we start with Ms. Akins?
Thank you, Madam Board President. I hope everyone enjoyed their Memorial Day and were able to honor those men and women who died in service in our military. Over our little break, I've been able to watch my sister's graduation from the University of Pennsylvania via video. So she's officially a grown, free adult, which is very weird, but it was incredible. John Legend popped in, which is pretty cool. And I was also able to pick up my cap and gown and my yearbook via the drive-through method at RB. And I look forward to graduating next week from high school. Everyone's getting so old, it seems. But this week I was also able to take a makeup exam for AP testing since one of my exams did not go through. But I'm done. Everything's over. I'm very excited to go into summer and get ready for college. I was also able to be a keynote speaker at the Your Voice conference, May 17th, where I was able to share my experience being a young leader and give some advice to other young advocates who look forward to making change in our world. I was also able to work with our incoming student board member on the No Place for Hate Words Matter campaign, which was made to spread positivity and allow kids to kind of share some good news amongst this chaotic times. And it was great to see the Mesa Verde kids starting a trend that was able to transpire across the district, which is amazing. And I was also able to attend a CSBA meeting with Dr. Patel, where we discussed ways to make sure every district was able to get equal representation with the compensation post COVID-19. And I was able to share my student perspective and how this whole recession is going to affect all students in all districts, and we should all try to get the same amount of help back. Hopefully the meeting will transpire pretty well within our state. And finally, I just want to share my gratitude for the student bodies who are just on social media really taking the time to really just educate themselves and to stand up and speak up for those voices who are so many times disregarded. And so tonight, that's why I'm wearing my BSU shirt. I know it's hard to see on the screen, but just to see the students just put, I mean, I know it's COVID right now, but to put protests together, to share their messages online, it means a lot, especially during this week. It's been very chaotic with the whole Amy Cooper situation and then Ahmaud Arbery and now with George Floyd. It's been a rough couple of weeks in my household dealing with everything, but I'm very happy that our students are able to educate themselves and educate others and spread messages of positivity and peace. So with that said, I conclude my report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aiken. Very thoughtful as always. On my screen, you're finally next to me, and I love it. I'll go next to Dr. Patel.
Good evening, everyone. I'll open my report with some of the behind the scenes work I've been involved with through advocacy as a board member and as a delegate with CSBA. I drafted and sent a letter on behalf of our entire county school districts, school board districts, to our San Diego County congressional delegation, as well as the majority and minority leaders, describing the challenges our districts are facing in this pandemic. These challenges really are being faced and addressed by all school districts, stressing that. And while our elected officials recognize that our schools are critical to opening up the economy, there still seems to be a struggle with allocating the necessary resources to open our schools safely and effectively. And I continue to stress that all districts need this emergency funding, not just our Title I schools or our concentration grant schools. On the state level, I've participated in 2 group meetings with the state assemblyman's office, Brian Manshine. One was with board member O'Connor Ratcliffe, and the other one was with student board member Mariana Akins. By the way, I have gotten so many words of praise about you, about how articulate you are, and how having you on that meeting really made a difference. You represented your student peers very, very well. I've gotten a lot of feedback on that. We advocated for broad and flexible distribution of this emergency funding that we hope to get from the federal government, and to consider opportunities for power purchasing agreements for school districts, essentially so we don't have to compete with each other to acquire necessary PPE, cleaning supplies, and technology. So looking at different ways of leveraging state support. In May, I attended the College Bound Virtual Finale program with keynote speaker William Allen Young. There were other board members as well, perhaps they'll elaborate. But it was a fantastic program celebrating the accomplishments of these students enrolled in the program. And I wanted to note that the group really has been an excellent resource for the families that they serve for years. And that was exemplified by the testimonials of elder siblings that were kind of put on the spot during the program to speak about where they've landed after years of graduating after the program. Congratulations again to all of the graduating students from the College Bound program. And of course, more congratulations to the students in elementary and middle schools who have gone through or are going through promotion parades this week. I participated in a couple and read about many of the others. so many kudos and thanks to all the staff and parents that spent hours over the last several days to congratulate our students and make sure all of this could happen. This is an important transition from one level to the other for a lot of our families, as seen by all the balloons and car decorations and everything that went on during these parades. It was pretty fantastic and uplifting. And I can't wait to see some of the high school parades that happen next week. I'll wrap up my report on a more somber note. As a scientist and a public education champion, I work in environments that are data-driven and outcomes-driven. In general, I'm pretty open to change, to adapt, and to let evidence be the driver of my decisions, such as closing opportunity gaps within our own school district. And when I see these eruptions of civil unrest and protests happening around our country, I understand that this is not due to what's immediately visible on the surface, but actually due to the injustice that is pervasive underneath. This week's events have provided pointed opportunities to discuss history, current events, and future possibilities with my own children and within my communities, all with the intent of nurturing more upstandards, supporting anti-racism advocacy efforts, and uncovering implicit bias. I look forward to the day, hopefully in the near future, where our shared values of equity permeate through our institutions, communities, and homes. But until then, the struggle is real, and it needs all of us acting together to make change. And with that, I close my report.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. Ms. Beatty.
Thank you. First, I want to congratulate all of our promoting fifth graders, promoting eighth graders, and especially our graduating seniors, and wish you all great success and happiness. And though this has been a challenging time, know that it's going to be a blip on the radar in your very long and accomplished and successful and adventurous lives, with so many special events that you have to look forward to. So take heart in that as we go through this challenge with the pandemic, let alone the heartbreaking events that were sort of the tinderbox to the current protests and all the issues. And I think America's collective heart has broken. And I think along with that, there's just been this incredible amount of simmering tension. And for me personally, I think something that has really just choked me up is seeing the images where in certain communities, law enforcement and the protesters have come together. They've either knelt together or prayed together or talked together or hugged. And, if we can just keep creating those moments, I think that's a step forward in the right direction. But wow, what a time this is. And gosh, best of luck to this generation of graduating seniors, class of 2020. And that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Beatty. Mr. Zane.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connor-Ratcliffe. First, let me say I want to echo Ms. Aiken's thoughts about, I hope everybody enjoyed their Memorial Day and took an opportunity to reflect on those who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our country. I look forward to meeting a fellow Quaker sometimes. Mariana, I hope you'll facilitate the introduction. This was the days leading up to the board meeting this evening, even if it's virtual, were some pretty heavy days, really heavy, gut-wrenching. And I think there's probably a lot of elected officials around the country who would like to say something powerful, would hope that they have it in them to share words that are as memorable as, Lincoln or JFK. But the reality is words, they're inadequate. What we don't need in this country are new laws. We need new attitudes. We need a changing of people's hearts and their minds. I'm blessed. My wife's not African American, but she's a woman of color. And I'm blessed to be married to her. She's a good sounding board. I think we all need to reflect and remember, I think that the good Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we talk. That's what's needed now more than anything, is listening. A friend of mine shared a cartoon on Facebook recently. I probably spend way too much time there for my wife's taste. I wish that there was actually an emoji that captured mad and sad. There just isn't yet. But he shared a great cartoon. Dr. Patel actually in her comments touched upon what's reflected in this cartoon. I'll try and hold it up here on the screen. I don't know if it gets reversed when you're looking at it. The top of it says racism caught on the cell phone. Below the iceberg is all the other racism. Let's make sure we're paying attention to below the surface of the water, not just above the surface. As it relates to this, on a lighter note, I do want to extend my congratulations to the class of 2020. I'm proud of the graduates of PUSD. I'm speaking more specifically now to the high schoolers than I am to the elementary or the middle schoolers, but they're living in unique times, very unique times, and not just because of COVID. They really have an opportunity here, I believe, to follow through on the notion of don't just be bystanders, be upstanders. And I've seen it happen already. I've seen the protests in Poway. I've seen it in Carmel Valley. I couldn't be prouder of the students of Poway Unified and the way they've composed themselves. It's fantastic. So congratulations to the class of 2020. You will get through this, not just COVID, but we're in a special time right now. Seize the moment. Congratulations. Enjoy your summer. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Zane. Ms. Couvrette.
This is exhausting listening to you, everyone, and their beautiful words and sentiments. And I'm so proud to be part of this group. I appreciate everyone's comments on everything. Like Mr. Zane was talking about listening, I've been able to listen a lot. I'm fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of juniors and seniors who are who understand the social media and the implication of what's going on, and the conversations that they're having. Kind of, even though these are horrible times, but kind of gives you hope for the future. Their ideas are so brilliant, and why didn't we think of this 20 years ago? Of some of the thoughts they have of correcting this current situation. And so I've been, like I said, I've really been enjoying listening to their thoughts and seeing them be able to take action and being empowered and having a voice, which is exciting to see that, and having our kids have that self-confidence to do things like this. I will say, on a lighter note, I've listened to a lot of elementary school parents who have a very renewed appreciation for teachers and have never looked more forward to summer than they do right now. And I got caught in the Painted Rock wonderful celebration, and I wish my car had been decorated like those, because they went all out and made their kids feel super special, which I think it's almost more special than the regular promotions would have been. So like we were saying, this is a different promotion and graduation time for our kids, but I think it's something that will stay in their hearts and be more memorial than before. was able to spend some time with UC trustee Zettel, because like I said, I surround myself with a bunch of kids who are juniors and seniors, and the questions they have about, colleges this year, what's going to happen, in the fall for them and what that's going to look like. But also my daughter's a junior and she has a bunch of friends that are juniors too. And what's the application process look like? What do SATs look like? And, these kids are really stressed about this because how do colleges look at 100,000 applications and choose, 5,000 kids? So she gave some wonderful insight to these girls and their mothers, and it's going to be a wonderful resource. So I wanted to share that as the UCs are going through the same problems and concerns that we are with the budget cuts and wanting to bring the kids back so they can have a normal freshman year, which is kind of hard in this current COVID situation. And then finally, I just want to say I'm looking forward to the high school celebrations. I am so proud of how our committee for the graduations worked together and truly honored what the kids wanted. If we had put together a big virtual video, I would have saddened because that was not what their voice was. And I'm excited to see what these parades are going to look like. And I sure hope that on July 30th, we're going to have a fantastic parties for all these kids. So on that, I will see you guys in a couple weeks.
Thank you, Ms. Bourette. My turn. I've had a surprising amount of activity this month, given everything's virtual still. The College Bound virtual finale was wonderful. Just to tack on to what Dr. Patel said, this has been a great partnership for so many years now, helping the district to close our opportunity gaps and further our family engagement goals. They've been wonderful. And that virtual finale was a great celebration of their scholars. And I look forward to many more years of that. I had a lot of fun filming our short messages to the 5th, 8th, and 12th grade students for ceremony videos. And thank you to Ms. Peck for making it all look so easy. That could have been 127 takes, but it wasn't. So that was nice. A little bit more seriously, I did quite a bit of lobbying, and COVID-19 expenses, the /school budget proposal for next year. I mean, I think my passion on this was probably pretty obvious to everybody when we were discussing our budget for next year. But I have been reaching out to our local elected officials, many emails, and was part of the lobbying phone call with Dr. Patel and Assemblymember Mainshine, who represents our Poway Unified area. These electeds may not have children in our schools, and many of them don't have any idea what the real impacts of the governor's budget proposal will be on our 37,000 students. And it's our job to tell them, and not just board members, parents too. Please do write letters to the governor, to our state representatives, even the federal government, because we've been largely ignored by the federal government relief as well. About funding, but also about reopening our schools. We can't do it if they don't let us. When it's safe, tell us how to do it. Tell us how to do it safely. Let us do it. We have a lot of differences in Poway Unified than our neighboring districts even. For instance, we talked briefly earlier about providing funding based on a district's 3-year rolling average daily attendance. Yes, it's better based on a COVID-19 year ADA, but that solution is something that favors districts with declining enrollments. We have increasing enrollments, so that is not our preferred version. We'd much rather have a funding model based on our enrollment. So that's just one of so many really complicated issues that make lobbying so vital for school board members. And I've been taking that very seriously, and we're not the only ones who can do it. If you're a member of your PTA, there's there are tons of resources out there. You don't even have to make up the letter yourself. Ask your local PTA. They'll have letters for you, and you can personalize them and make it more about your experience and your students' experiences. Students write letters. This is important. We're obviously, it's been working, because between the governor's devastating budget proposal till now, it looks like our Senate and Assembly members have heard us, and they're not going to pass the governor's budget. They're going to come up with a compromise that saves us, because there was no way we could do it. And even as this meeting's been going on, I've been seeing little messages go across about the changes that are happening right now while we're meeting, that are happening at the state level that sound really promising. But that wouldn't have happened if they hadn't heard from all of us. And there's still time. It's not a done deal. Please take the time, write the emails, make the phone calls. It's important. I also was able to attend our SAI advisory committee. Again, this is our opportunity in the district right now. We have our 3 model schools who are working really hard to provide more opportunities for inclusion for students who access our special education services. I am so proud of this group. This was the final meeting of the school year. Mr. Mizell was there, and all of his directors and representatives from our 3 model schools. We reviewed the proposed professional learning for next year. We talked about lessons learned and how we've succeeded this year. Talked about ideas for gathering more measurable data for next year, so that when we push it out to additional schools, they know what to look for, they know what to measure. As I told the group, again, I'm so proud of their work and the bravery that it took for them to undertake something new like this. It's what's best for all kids, so we must. I would love to see additional COSAs and TOSAs instead of just the one of each that we have right now to support this work. I cannot wait for there to be more opportunities for all of our schools and all of our kids to have these more inclusive opportunities. Hopefully our budget realities will be such that we can move forward with vital work like this. And this isn't the only thing, but this is one that I've been very focused on and will continue to support wholeheartedly. Elementary promotions for 5th graders. This included my son and my niece. I have another niece promoting through 8th grade on Friday. It's a family affair. We're excited. Our cars were decorated. We have balloons coming out our ears. Where do you get the chalk marker for your windows? We know. Call me. I can tell you. It's been amazing. It was a wonderful celebration for my 5th grade family members, and I expect nothing less for my 8th grade family member on Friday. So congratulations to all our students and to Miss Akins, our 12th graders additionally. So happy promotion, happy graduation, and have a happy summer. But please, please do remember, in the midst of your celebrations, important events are happening all around us. Please don't stop paying attention. Don't stop caring. Don't stop thinking. The quote that Dr. Phelps used earlier this week at the end of her letter by Edward Hale really spoke to me, and I hope to you as well. I just want to share it again. I am only one, but still, I am one. I cannot do everything, but still, I can do something. Because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can. So for me, again, this one got me. I loved it. But for me, I will listen and I will learn. And when I know better, I will do better. And when my actions truly match my aspirations, I'll be the role model that my children deserve. So please don't stop thinking. Thanks. Dr. Phelps, it's your turn.
Oh, great. Thank you. Make me teary, you and Mr. Zane, and then now it's my turn. Thank you. Oh my gosh. I just want to echo everything that the trustees have said. This truly has been really tough weeks, but really, truly the last few months have been the toughest months I've ever experienced as a district leader, as an educator. And I don't really know if people understand to the depth of how difficult it's been. just from turning education on a dime without funding. On how do you do that with the burden and heavy weight of caring to ensure that all of our kids are getting the learning that they need to finish the school year, carrying the burden that our kids won't get to graduate in the way that all of us have had that experience to be able to live through. The burden of ensuring that, we can provide services to kids while our families around us are losing businesses and jobs and all of that. It's been really, really hard. Even personally speaking, I had a conversation the other day with my daughter. And this is really hard for me because she said, Mom, this is supposed to be like one of my best years ever. She didn't get to do her Washington, D.C. trip. She didn't get to promote. She was supposed to promote this year. She got selected to be one of the few players in the country to play on the first ever Triple Crown International South Korean team. She, was looking forward to so many firsts for her. And it was really hard for me to have that conversation. Following that conversation, my daughter said, Mom, I don't understand. How do we from 1 minute thank our heroes and our first responders to the very next day throwing rocks and burn buildings and show violence and say now we hate our first responders. So it's been tough times, hard conversations at home, carrying the burden, watching my staff and myself be beaten up every day by emails and hate emails and judgment from community members and people who are unhappy with the way we're doing things and criticizing the way everything is done. We really work hard to try to think about all aspects of all the decisions that we make to do the best for all of our kids. And, I couldn't do it without having the amazing staff that I do. So I want to just take a minute to thank all of my staff, our district leadership, for their leadership, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be the front runner, the lead district in the state that everyone's watching and mimicking and mirroring everything we're doing, because we have amazing employees in our district. And they've done an incredible job. And so I want to thank all of you for your hard work. And I know that you get beaten up because you get the same emails that I do. But I don't care what people say. I don't care the mean things that they say because you've done an amazing job. And you should know that. And I am very, very proud to be the superintendent of Poway Unified. And I'm very proud of all the things that you guys have done and the leadership that you've shown in spite of all the horrible emails that we received. I can't believe that this is actually our last meeting before this school year actually officially ends. And I do want to thank all of our staff, students, and parents and our board members for making it through what is arguably one of the most difficult and challenging years to ever face education. Together, we flipped the script, completely changing the way that our teachers teach, our students learn via distance learning. We continue to provide essential services, including serving over 180,000 free meals. We ensured our students stayed connected, distributing over 7,500 laptops. We came up with creative solutions. We have over 99.5% of our students participating in distance learning across our district, which means that's over 36,000 students that are actually continuing their learning. We came up with creative solutions, including a way to celebrate our graduates. We continue to adapt and persevere as we figure out how to safely reopen our schools in the fall. This hasn't been easy, but I've never been prouder to be the superintendent of Poway Unified School District. I'm looking forward to celebrating all of our hard work as we come to a close to another school year. It was so wonderful to see all of our fifth graders promoting on Monday and Tuesday, and our teachers and our principals did an amazing job, decorating it and trying to make it special for all of our kids. Love seeing the balloon arches, the teachers, the hugs, the pictures. Really, it touches my heart. Tomorrow on Friday, we have our eighth graders promoting. Next week, we have our drive-through graduation processions for the class of 2020. I know that these are not the ideal situations and not everyone's happy, but you know what? We're doing the best that we can. And I really think that everyone's done an amazing job in the circumstances of the conditions that we've done. And people don't understand the amount of work it takes to just put on that one event and the thousands of dollars it takes to put on that event. So I want to thank everybody. It's been exciting. I look forward to seeing the graduation drive-throughs, graduation processions for our class of 2020 at all of our high schools. That will be going on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week because we have so many graduates. I think we would block city traffic if we did it all in one day. So it does have to go over a period of 3 days next week. Congratulations to all of our graduates and all of our students who did promote, who we will be able to say that you can say that this was the most memorable graduation stories that you will ever be able to tell. And on a personal note, because I know my family's watching, I just want to tell my daughter that I couldn't be more prouder of you. She graduated with as a distinguished graduate, having all 4.0 A's in all grades and citizenship for all 3 years of middle school. And so I couldn't be more proud of her. And so sorry it's not the way that you hope to graduate, but I know that you will persevere, and because of all this, you'll be a stronger person. And I just am so proud of all of our kids. Thank you for everything that all of you guys have done and for all of your hard work. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Phelps. I think we all need a virtual group hug right now. This brings us to agenda item 14.0, adjournment. Our next regularly scheduled board meeting will be Thursday, June 25th at 6 p.m. at the Poway Unified School District office. We will be meeting in person, all the board members, our superintendent, and cabinet. We will be social distancing, so it'll look different for those of you watching on TV. We'll be spread out on the dais and on the computer and around the room. But we'll all be in the same room this time. So public comment arrangements will remain the same as this meeting until we can open it all the way back up. But we're moving in that direction. So with that, we are adjourned at 9:36 p.m. Thanks.